Geopolitical Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Trump surrenders to Iran. What humiliation. Israel complains Iran won't stop attacking them. Iran war update. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, the hardest working revolutionary in the business is back, and we got to cover the humiliation of Trump and see exactly what is in this ceasefire and how much humiliation do Israel get.
I'll let you, Lisa, we can go live, and you can say that on live. So I've just gotten a report, Larry. So we posted it before anyone else. I got a report from someone part of the negotiations so their message just said Trump accepted a ceasefire, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get more clarity. So it didn't say delay. He didn't say delay. It did not say whether Iran accepted. That's all it said, and then haven't been able to hear from them since.
Yeah.
But Trump accepted a 15-day ceasefire. So that's the information we got from there.
Yeah.
Then a few minutes later, so that was about, I got that information about, okay, the markets are moving as we speak. I got it 44 minutes ago. All right, the markets are moving, by the way. So oil is crashing as we speak. Poly market just hit up. So poly market just hit 65 to 80% from 30. I haven't looked at equities yet. But and then we had a report, because the big question, will Iran accept? Because me and you have talked about it, and I agree with your analysis and others, is that Iran is the one that is not accepting a ceasefire. And that's why we haven't spoken about Trump's post. But that's why Trump is all over the place with these threats. He's trying to get them to accept the ceasefire. And Qatar reported, Qatari newspaper, let me see what it's called, just share full context. And they reported that Qatar's Al Arabi Al Jadid says a source has confirmed to them Iran has accepted a ceasefire. They didn't say also, because they don't know about the Trump one. So that's what Qatar said. And CNN just said about 10 minutes ago that they expect a ceasefire by tonight. Finally, this is the day we're waiting for the good news. I hope. So to be clear, this is a ceasefire, not a delay, based on what my source told me, and then what Al Arabiya and Qatar said, and what CNN is saying. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it seems to be deadline extension. Just now came in. Trump has posted just now. All right, let me read out the post. Let me read it out to you now for everyone else. He just posted right now, Larry. That's why the markets are moving. Let me make sure the team all right, there it is, just verified it. All right, I'm going to read out the post by Trump. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason of doing so is what we have already met and exceeded all military objectives. And so first is your initial reaction before I continue reading it. I'm just making sure. Sorry, man, just a lot happening behind the scenes. I'll be 2 seconds. I'll read it. All right, done. Confirmed with all my sources. This is such good news. You have no idea the happiness, because this has been really weighing on me. This will be a double-sided ceasefire.
Be careful.
I'll read it. I'll read it out. I know you.
I would caution the happiness. I think until you hear the Iranian authorities come out and say, and they announce it unilaterally, you don't have an agreement. This is desperation on the part of the West. This is desperation on the part of Trump. The Pakistanis are desperate. But Iran's made its position clear. Why would Iran change its position?
We don't know what concessions we're giving behind the scenes. Maybe he's agreed to sanctions relief. Maybe he's agreed they charged a toll at the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe they did some sort of business deal.
Well, no, that's if they accept the Iranian conditions, yes, there could be a ceasefire. That's
what happened is Trump said they're looking at Iran's 10-point plan. Iran said, "Here with your 15-point plan. We got a 10-point plan." And Trump said, "Okay, let's go over that." That's what happened. And that 10-point plan is what Iran been talking about the whole fucking time. Reparations. You lead the Middle East. We're going to continue to sanctions relief, all that type of shit. We still going to be charging you at the Strait of Hormuz. That's an Iran 10-point plan. And that's what the U.S. is negotiating.
That's the key. Because Iran's not going to just open the strait back up. That's its leverage. That's what is allowing it to control.
From what I'm saying, Iran is saying that, yes, they will be opening it up. They guiding people through. They're going to be getting paid. So everybody who pay and do as they say, you can come through. Trump has them being ultimately humiliated. Iran is in complete control of the strait, and you still got to pay your fees to come through there.
The United States is at the negotiating table, number one. And number two, the immediate lifting of sanctions. Okay, let's see it. Until those sanctions are actually lifted, Iran should make a step as far as opening the strait. I think, look, I think there are enough people in senior leadership positions who've had family members and friends murdered by the Israelis and by the United States. They're not going to go for some just superficial symbolic gesture. No, this has got to have some real teeth in it, and teeth that meet the Iranian demands. Otherwise, there's not going to be a ceasefire. And I would argue a lot of this is market manipulation that's going on. Sorry to be Debbie Downer here.
No, it's fine. So we're waiting now for an Iranian confirmation. But what if a deal was made and concessions were made that we don't know about yet?
Yeah, if the United States makes concessions, and I could see why they could be motivated to do so.
Because Trump seemed desperate, Larry. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did some concessions. He conceded.
No, he is, and he's under growing pressure. His political base is just, he's got the people who say that they are MAGA. Yes, they support Trump 100%. I suspect that group of people accounts for about 8% of the voting population. The independent voters have fled from Trump as if he's got the bubonic plague. The Democrats, they're certainly not lining up for Trump. And registered Republicans are increasingly dissatisfied. So there is, I think
Iranians is releasing what they told the U.S. We're going to retain control of the Strait of Hormuz. You're still going to pay us $2 million a ship. We're going to maintain our right to enrich uranium. Total humiliation. Sanctions relief immediately. Trump doesn't surrender, bro.
Iran's still calling the shots. I've been monitoring Telegram in terms of, the bombing and missile strikes. They're still going on. And B-52 bombers entered the airspace in the Middle East just about 20 minutes ago. So those B-52s, if they start unloading, there's not going to be any ceasefire until Iran.
Grip, stability, precision. That's the essence of driving. Lawfin.
Yeah, and right now you got two Air Force KC-135 Stratotankers who are doing refueling over the Eastern Mediterranean, just north of Egypt. So, they're refueling aircraft to continue pounding Iran, and Iran's continuing to retaliate.
Sorry, I'm just full of emotion. I know a lot of people could be as well. This has been a pretty rough war. It's been a really, really rough war because I got really worried. So let's talk about what happens next. If this is a ceasefire, no one knows the day after because a ceasefire is a ceasefire. A ceasefire is not an end to the war.
Well, again, what are the conditions for the ceasefire? I do not think if it's just that Iran's going to stop launching missiles and wait and see what the West does, that's not going to happen. The West, Israel, and the United States in particular will have to have promised and given guarantees that you're going to have immediate sanction relief for Iran. Iran is going to continue to exercise, if you will, a cover charge to use the Persian Gulf, and they will split that money between them and Oman. So that Iran might be willing to back off for demands that U.S. withdraw from bases, because in fact, there's been a de facto withdrawal. The U.S. base that was at Bahrain, that's not there, and they're not coming back to that. Similarly, at bases in Kuwait, they may be able to retain Al Udeid, and that has more to do with Qatar's role in being somewhat conciliatory towards Iran. But there won't be any continued presence in the UAE. So, but
we don't know. We've said the long-term repercussions of this, Larry, are gonna be felt for a generation, if not generations. This is a ceasefire. Right. This is only the beginning of what happens next, the day after.
Yeah, there's got to be firm guarantees from Iran's standpoint that Israel and the United States will never again try to attack it. And I don't see how Trump and those around him walk back what they've been saying, the lies they've been telling about Iran. I don't see how they do that. So from Iran's standpoint, they need to continue to press that they will get all of their demands met. Now, we don't know what the Chinese and Russians are doing behind the scenes. Because I think Trump's rhetoric in the last 24 hours, the obscenities that he spewed on Sunday, followed by his end of civilization tonight, have genuinely alarmed a lot of people and raised questions about Trump's sanity. And I don't think this was just a negotiating ploy. So I think Iran is long past trying to placate or play to Donald Trump's idiosyncrasies.
What happened based on current information? The U.S. has agreed to stop all attacks against Iran for a period of 2 weeks. In return, Iran will not strike U.S. assets or other assets in the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed during these 2 weeks. It's a big point. But if Iran doesn't open it, the war will resume. Israel is not part of the ceasefire, and Iran will continue targeting it. This Trump did exactly what I recommended he should do. Walk away. Let them clean up the mess.
Yeah.
Israel is now alone. Hezbollah is going to continue getting struck. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. The rest of the world is screwed. Larry, what is going to happen to Europe? What's going to happen to Asia?
Yeah, they're going to have to make their way to Iran. Iran's going to become a power broker if it continues to insist on maintaining the control over the Strait of Hormuz. If there are no more attacks against Iran out of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, then I think Iran at that point will leave them alone. But they will then go after Israel. And this, if Trump really did that, basically says, okay, we're going to declare a unilateral ceasefire, but Iran can continue to pound the shit out of Israel. That's gonna really create some panic in Israel, because that's the first sign of the United States distancing themselves. But frankly, I think if that's the deal, and the devil's always in the details here, my friend. If that's the deal, then I think the Trump has finally recognized his own political survival depends upon jettison its relationship, or his relationship with Israel. I don't know. Did you happen to catch Tucker Carlson's?
He lost his mind. He lost his mind on Trump's post about worries about nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
I was one of the few, and you probably won't like me for this, Larry. I was one of the few saying, guys, I'm going to reserve judgment, even though I was one of the biggest opponents of this war, and I got a lot of hate from it. I'm going to reserve judgment on all of Trump's crazy posts. For me, and I made a tweet about it. I'm like, the crazier he sounds, the more optimistic I am about a deal, because I think this shows that he's done with the war and he's going to walk away. This is bad news for Israel, and this shows to me that he is not Israel's puppet. I know probably a lot of people will hate me, but he's not Israel's puppet, because he just left Israel hanging right now. And America first, he just left allies hanging. I think people understand that that's understand that the damage this is going to cause. The 2 weeks of closure of the Straits, Larry, this is going to screw Europe and Asia if this doesn't change. But I think Iran will make exceptions for them and they'll pay them. Iran will make a lot of money from this.
Yeah, except here's the problem. And so the U.S. says, okay, don't attack us anymore. We won't attack you. But then the United States withdraws its forces and puts them on Israeli military bases. And Israel is using those bases to launch attacks on Iran. So when Iran retaliates against Israel, hits those bases, Trump's going to be able to come back and say, "Hey, see, you broke the ceasefire."
You're pessimistic that the ceasefire will hold?
Oh yes, absolutely.
First, I wish you were next to me. I want to hug you, Larry. I think we've been through all this war together. But I'm not naive. I call myself naive, but I'm not naive. I think you make a very valid point here. We have a history in the Middle East of ceasefires breaking. In Lebanon, there's barely a ceasefire. Gaza still getting bombed. And now Iran have a ceasefire. Even though I'm still more optimistic, and I still think it will hold because Trump cannot afford. He knows Trump lost. The US lost this war. Trump made a mistake. He did the right thing getting out of it. And obviously, this is my opinion, and I could be completely wrong. He did the right thing getting out of it. And I genuinely don't think he'll get back into it, especially after what happened this month. I think he's traumatized from ever bombing another country for the rest of his term. This would have traumatized him. The only question is,
you would hope,
when will Israel end? I hope.
Well, you know, I know for a fact that, you know, when this whole thing started more than a month ago, there was a lot of euphoria. There was within the ranks of the military, the people working the crisis action centers, they were pretty upbeat. They said, "Man, we got this. Iran's not going to be able to stand up against us. We're going to suppress it and beat them, etc." Now the mood has completely changed. They've recognized they're not sure we can. They're not sure, and I've heard people say this that are involved. We don't see any path forward for us to win.
When you're driving, silence or put away your phone. Don't let your phone blind you.
This is going to go on for a long time. And they're talking through 2028, okay? For at least 2 more years. That's what the military is starting to plan for. So when you tie that in with what happened over the weekend with the attempt to rescue, or the rescue attempt of that colonel that was the backseater on the F-15. The United States lost close to $500 million in aircraft. Losing the A-10, the F-15 to the C-130s, 4 AH-6 Little Birds, and 2 Predators. All the cost of all those comes up to about $480 million. So those are significant losses. You know, if you're losing close to $1 billion every 2 days in aircraft, holy smokes! So I know that Trump is desperate for a ceasefire, but Iran, compare the terms, the 15-point plan that the United States gave to the Pakistanis passed on to the Iranians, and with the 10-point plan that the Iranians came back with. And then explain how you bridge those two.
What happens if, I'm going to ask you a separate question though about Israel, because you mentioned that if Iran continues bombing Israel, Trump will have no choice but to get involved.
Well, if U.S. forces are moved out of, say, Jordan and or Saudi Arabia and co-located with Israel at Israeli military bases, then those bases are attacked. Trump he would come out and claim that this was a violation of the ceasefire, even though from Iran's standpoint, they're attacking Israeli targets. They're not trying to attack U.S. targets.
Why would I have another question? Why would Iran? I don't think Iran cares about a war with Israel because they don't benefit from it. Israel has nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran can keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, Larry, then Israel knows they don't have enough interceptors. There was a report today they're using interceptors manufactured in 2026. There was someone that took a photo of an interceptor that just fell onto the ground, and it had the date of manufactured in 2026, which means months ago. That means they're running at the last stockpiles they have left. Now, this is speculation based on the image that was leaking. If that's the case, then Israel can't sustain this, Larry. And if Iran could keep the Strait of Hormuz closed for 2 weeks, maybe longer, we'll see. Iran's going to make money. Israel ends the war and they can survive without getting bombed heavily with the interceptors running low. And Trump has walked out of a very messy war. It just seems like a win-win for me. Iran will be part of the ceasefire. Just came in according to CNN.
No,
can I hug you now, Larry?
No.
Can I hug you?
Let's hear it from Iran. Let's hear it from Iran.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Iran. Yeah.
Yeah. CNN, CNN be confusing wishful thinking. I want to hear it from an Iranian authority and what Iran absolutely says about it. That's the issue. Because the Pakistanis may be getting all this pressure, and actually, I think they're probably getting a little ahead of themselves. I do not see the Iranian people in a mood to do something that could be viewed as a surrender. They're not about to do that. So if the United States is going to stop bombing, and let's see right now, you've got B-52s en route. So what happens in the next hour? And then let's see, just had ballistic missile launches from Iran towards Israel right now.
Yeah, that came in just a few minutes ago. Yeah, that came in. Literally, I was looking at it while you were speaking. So there were alerts at 7 minutes ago, alerts across Israel. And then missiles are incoming right now in Israel. As we speak, literally in the same 60 seconds, missiles were landing and Israel declared a ceasefire, according to CNN. That's not official yet, just to be clear.
Yeah. We'll see if Israel's not, depending on the news source, Israel is not part of the ceasefire. I want to hear Arachi or the Ayatollah himself, someone come out, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, the spokesman for them, announce, okay, we've accepted a proposed ceasefire, but under what conditions? They're not just going to accept a ceasefire for ceasefire's sake.
Yeah, agree. The conditions, I think, the big part. I have a feeling that there's major concessions on the American side, Larry, for this to happen. Oh yeah, which is keeping the concession, Larry. The concession is keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. That is very significant. He left Europe and Asia hanging, and Europe and Asia will have to pay money now to Iran to get their ships through for Iran to make money on this war.
Right. Yeah. And on top of it, that is, let's call it Iran's backdoor way of getting compensation or reparations for the damage that it has suffered.
Well, that's what Iran.
So,
in one of the statements that I think
there's supposed to be.
No, that's what Iran said.
We'll see if there's an official statement out.
To take the $2 million, they would give Oman $1 million, but for their reparations that they need to rebuild a country, you got to pay to get through the Strait of Hormuz. Period.
Of Iran in the next hour or so.
This is unequivocally a massive win for Iran.
Oh yeah.
Strategically, this is a massive win for Iran. Iran essentially now controls the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of it depends what happens next. And I don't know what the Gulf had no idea what was going to happen. They were hunkering down for hell tonight. They were a bridge was closed between Bahrain and Saudi. The embassy, some European embassy in Qatar asked people to stay at home. Kuwait asked people to stay at home all evening. A Qatari embassy, I think some European embassy in Qatar asked its citizen to stock up on food and water and supplies ahead of tonight.
Right.
So the Gulf, and there was reports that the Gulf had no idea what was going to happen next. So I don't think the Gulf had any say in this, Larry. And I think they're going to also end up being losers.
Yeah. They're, the Saudis, the Qataris and Omanis, they realize the deals to be had with Iran. You cut the deal with Iran, they're safe, they're secure. You cut the deal with the United States, you're exposed. And on top of it, the United States will abandon you like a cheap prostitute. You know, they won't hang around at all. If there's pressure, you know, if you hear the U.S. say, we got your back, man, you better worry about what they're doing to your back, because it's nothing pleasant. But see, then also weighs in, well, what happens now to Hezbollah? And
that was going to think about it. There's a part of the ceasefire, and I think that it is, because Iran is calling the shots right now. I think it is.
Well, and the casualties that Israel is now reporting, and you got to put quote question marks and quotation marks around this, that they've had over 400 casualties. Now, I think the number is much higher, but that the fact, this may very well be that they will stop bombing Lebanon, and they will stop attacking into southern Lebanon, and will draw back into Israel, which is, it's sort of like what they did 20 years ago with the 2006 invasion into the southern Lebanon, that was again beaten back by Hezbollah. So, and right now, as we're talking, there was just an explosion in Tehran. So
there's two Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon as we speak. Tasnim said more details on the ceasefire will be announced soon. That's by Iran.
We want edges that are straighter and boxwoods that are boxier, and we only use professional-grade echo power.
That's good.
But Trump decides. That's according to Channel 12. Trump decided, and Israel's not happy with the deal. So we're getting news literally as they come in.
Yeah, well, this underscores the kind of political pressure that Trump is under. His brave bravado, claiming that he's winning and Iran is losing. I know. I heard from a friend today, and he said that what the U.S. military is now seeing is increasing sophistication on the air defense by Iran. That Iran is getting help from Russia and China, that their air defense systems becoming much more sophisticated, much more effective, and that as a result of this, it's going to result in more U.S. casualties. That may also be a driving force in this.
I have a feeling, Larry, Trump decided to end the war yesterday or even 2 days ago. When he started posting those crazy things, he decided this days ago, and he had to go through the process. Like I think, obviously I'm a businessman, so I'm always negotiating. And if I want to negotiate a really hard deal, I would make it sound like I have to make the other party realize I'm on one extreme. So let's say I want someone to accept a deal, or I want someone to accept a certain price. I make it seem like this price is non-negotiable. I'm not going to budge, and I fight till the end, until they're about to crack, and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I'll fold.
Yeah.
But then they would have gotten very close to that number. I think that's what Trump, as a businessman, I'm not saying this is the right politics. I think there's a cost to the rhetoric.
Sure.
I said that I'm not as upset about the rhetoric as some others. Doesn't mean I'm okay with it and I agree with it. I think this is Trump's way of doing business. I just think that on the international stage, there's a certain decorum that a certain international system that the world has built since World War II. It's a very fragile system. And Trump is right now the most powerful person in the world, the president of the United States. And but rhetoric like this could risk to shatter that system that is so fragile in a world that is so fragile. So I don't like that rhetoric, but I'm not like extremely offended like Tucker and others about it. I would have lost my mind if he actually delivered on those threats. I would have been in a very different place, but I never thought he would.
Well,
Iran has just two updates. A last-minute intervention by China helped lead to Iran accepting Pakistan's 2-week survival, a 2-week ceasefire proposal. 3 Iranian officials tell the New York Times. China asked Iran to show flexibility and diffuse tensions amid growing economic uncertainty caused by damages to Iranian infrastructure. China ended the war. Breaking, Iran has not yet agreed to the conditions of the ceasefire. This according also to the New York Times, like you said. So 2 breaking news.
Yeah. Iran's going to ultimately call the shots. You're describing Do you remember the Lethal Weapon movies with Mel Gibson?
Yes.
So, and in the very first movie, Mel Gibson was presented as like this crazy guy that you didn't know what he was going to do, and that's sort of you're describing Donald Trump as like an ugly Mel Gibson. Okay, crazy, slapping his face and putting the gun at his head and pressing the trigger and just doing bizarre things. But you have to step back and say, okay, why are they doing that? The market, they hang on every word that Donald Trump says. And when it looked like that this was headed towards a conflict, the market was crashing. And then, as you pointed out, oh no, the ceasefire. Oh, the market starts coming back. Well, this is not based upon actually any objective facts. This is all about feelings. And so when you get a market flip-flopping around like that on feelings, you then have to step back and say, okay, what is actually going to take place? The kind of pressure that Trump is getting now from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Dave Smith, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones. You've got a whole group of social media platforms that have hundreds of thousands. And actually, when you total all, it's well into the millions.
Yeah.
And he's getting hammered. He's getting destroyed. So, I think that's one factor. The other factor has got to be the members of Congress that have gone home for vacation, this 2-week vacation. I think the Republicans they realize they're going to lose. They're going to have power completely ripped out of their hands come November. So Trump's now in a race to try to mitigate that. I don't think he can. I think the damage is done. It's too far gone.
So I've got 2 new updates for you, Larry. So number one is, according to Barack, so for the audience, we're getting the updates as soon as they come in. So we have, as you know, on X, we have a team of about over 20 people that post the news as they come in, and they try to verify it as quickly as possible. So we're getting the news probably before anyone. Well, we broke the story of the ceasefire before anyone, so I take credit personally to that. But in terms of the other news, we're getting it pretty quickly. So number one is the bad news. We're talking about Hezbollah, Larry. Hezbollah is not part of the ceasefire, according to Channel 12. So that's a bit of a surprise to me, unless we get something new. Number two is a senior White House official tells me Israel has agreed. That's Axios. Israel has agreed to the ceasefire and will suspend its attack for 2 weeks. The ceasefire will take effect when Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. So that was by Barak David from Axios. Now, again, I don't know how legitimate that is and what he means by the ceasefire will take effect when Iran opens. Maybe that's Israeli ceasefire or another ceasefire. So that's another piece of news. Another one here, breaking. Iran as says the United States has agreed to their 10-point proposal, which included no future aggression. Iran keeps control of the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of uranium enrichment, all sanctions lifted, U.S. forces withdraw from the region, compensation paid to Iran, war ends on all fronts.
Yeah, if the United States accepted that, in which I'm also
Iran 10-point plan, bro. Total surrender.
Doubtful of that, but if they accepted that, then yeah, they could have a deal. But Israel's not going to accept that. But here's the good news: Israel depends heavily on the United States for air refueling, because it's the jets that he's flying and launching attacks against Iran are handled, or they get refueled by American tankers. So if Trump's serious about pulling back and licking our wounds, because we've taken some significant, we've lost in the last 5.5 weeks, the United States has lost more aircraft than it did in the entirety of the war in Afghanistan,
Vietnam,
and Iraq, and you have to go back to Vietnam to find these kinds of losses.
The biggest loss in 24 hours since the Vietnam War, and that day that the rescue operations, etc., was a pretty bad day.
Right. Yeah. So that's, I think that's another factor that's weighing in there. But again, what's so disturbing is Trump's rants, his comments are so
Statement by
divorced.
Iran's Supreme National Security Council. That's the National Security Council that said what I've mentioned. That's pretty significant. So, statement by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The U.S. has agreed to Iran's ceasefire conditions, commitment to non-aggression, continued Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, termination of all resolutions to the UN Council and the IAEA, a Board of Governors, that's a typo here, payments of compensation for Iran, withdrawal of American combat forces from the region, cessation of war on all fronts.
Yeah, that is stunning. Like I said, if that's
That
true,
changes everything. There's no way it's true.
yeah, yeah. I would say if Trump did that, my God, Lindsey Graham, we're going to see her head explode. I mean, his head explode. So, Miriam Adelson, the wife of Sheldon Adelson, boy, oh boy, she's going to demand her $250 million back. They'll be chased. Trump will be worried more about assassination from that crowd. So, like I said, Iran's made very clear what its conditions for ceasefire are, and if the West makes that, great, we got a deal. I don't see Trump agreeing to that, but we'll see.
Yeah, sorry, I keep looking down, Larry. As I'm
no, that's all right. I understand.
It's there's so many happening. A White House official tells Axios that the ceasefire will only come into force when Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, so see, and Iran's not going to open the Strait of Hormuz. No,
that changes everything.
Yeah. You guys go first, okay? You go first. You lift the sanctions on us. You show we did this. Here's Iran's position. They said we did this once before. We signed the JCPOA. We allowed inspectors in. We abided by the IAEA guidelines. You were supposed to lift the sanctions, and you never did. And so now we're supposed to trust you? Oh, trust us. Yeah. You open the strait, and then we'll lift these sanctions. No. If Iran called me up and asked for advice, I'd say, you put the deal on the table. They want it. There's the deal.
Something's not adding up, Larry, anymore. Something's not adding up. I know I jumped the gun, and you were telling me, Mario, it just doesn't add up. It's not adding up because I know you're laughing, but
no, I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I just look, that's why I'm an old guy.
Exactly. This is the I told you so laugh, and you're right. Because Axios now saying opposite of what. So Trump is saying there's a ceasefire. Ceasefire is a ceasefire. But if Axios says, according to Axios, we don't know if it's true, White House officials only applies if the Strait of Hormuz is opened. Iran won't open it. You're right. And then Iran's statement of what the U.S. agreed to, there is no way the U.S. agreed now suddenly within hours to remove all troops from the region. So is Iran saying there is no ceasefire? Is Iran mocking the U.S. right now? I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll wait and see what the official statement is. And Trump's got 50 minutes till 8 p.m. So we'll see what happens at 8 p.m.
So what's happening? Sorry, I know I'm asking the question again. What is happening? Something doesn't add up.
You've got these mediators in Pakistan. So you got the Pakis, the Egyptians, and were the Saudis part of that, or the Turks? I guess the Turks.
I think it was the Turks. Saudis are not.
The Saudis aren't part of that.
Iran doesn't want the Saudis involved. Yeah.
So they're desperate to get a deal, and so again, when they're talking to the Iranians, they're hearing perhaps what they want to hear, and then when they're talking to the United States is hearing what it wants to hear. China has got. China is, let's say, more economically compromised because of its investments in the other Persian Gulf countries. So it's going to definitely encourage Iran to, back off. But I think from the Russian standpoint, they understand that the West is not to be trusted in these kinds of deals. So, Iran came back with its 10-point plan. And we'll see if if the United States accepts it. If the deal boils down that they will only accept Iran's 10 points if Iran first opens the Strait of Hormuz and stops blocking traffic, then Iran loses its leverage. I mean, it can reimpose it. Yeah, but then when it reimposes it, then it's going to be seen as the aggressor. See, this time when it closed it, it was reacting to an unprovoked, illegal attack. Now, if it, quote, makes this agreement, and then the West doesn't uphold its side of the agreement, but they say, oh, well, we're going to do it eventually or at some point.
Let me give
apart.
Let's give I'm going to give a few updates and I'll give a recap to the audience because there's a lot happening, everyone. And I've got a team, as I said, of 20 people trying to get us all the news and make sense of it. And Larry analyzing it for us because there's a lot. So it all started for me, it started about 55 minutes ago. I got the news that Trump agreed to a ceasefire. Ceasefire was the key word, but Trump agreed. That's what the source told me. A source as part of the negotiations. They're pretty, very, very conservative when they make statements. That they're not get too excited, make statements out of nowhere. But they were very clear in their wording. Trump agreed to a ceasefire. And then less than an hour later, 50 minutes later, Trump says he agreed to a ceasefire. We read out the post. Lisa, if you could put that post, the Trump post again on screen for people to read it while I give them the overview. So Trump put out that post. Everyone believed that a ceasefire has been reached. The market a report by a security source told Channel 11, quote, we were surprised by Trump's decision and received updates at the last minute after everything was decided. So Israel was kept out of it, according to multiple reports now. So then I'm just seeing the latest updates. All right. So then the bad news comes in, everyone. Number one is, according to Axios, a White House official told Axios that the ceasefire will only come into force when Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so the ceasefire will only come into force when Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's very bizarre because earlier reports were saying that Iran will not open the Strait of Hormuz. And the other reports are saying that, by the way, oil is below $100. So that's really good news. Other reports were saying that Iran will keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Israel was saying that a ceasefire will only apply if the Strait of Hormuz is open, sources in Israel. And now the biggest shock of all is the response by Iran. Now, Larry's been telling me, Mario, wait for the Iranians to speak, wait for the Iranians to speak. And he's right, because the Iranians made a statement that's completely different from what we've seen. The statement by Iran, let me open it up quickly here. There it is. Statement by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The U.S. has accepted a humiliating defeat and agreed to all of Iran's ceasefire conditions. One, first, Iran, let's not do this. Let's ease up the rhetoric so you can get a win. Let's not do what Trump does. All of you, just don't do that. If both people have a strong attitude, they're going to keep clashing. The U.S. has accepted a humiliating defeat. One, commitment to non-aggression. Perfect. That sounds like a fair deal. I'm fine with it. Continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. Initially, I thought fine, because the deal said for 2 weeks. I think that's what Trump's post said. For 2 weeks, they'll have control of the Strait of Hormuz, or reports were saying that. Continued Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. But now we're getting reports, as I said, that the ceasefire doesn't apply until the Strait of Hormuz is opened. So it's already a clash. Gets worse. Third term, according to Iran, according to them, U.S. accepted. Acceptance of uranium enrichment. There is no way they're going to accept uranium enrichment that early. There must be something they have to give Trump, other than Khamenei's death replaced by another Khamenei. 4, lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions. I believe that. I believe that was agreed on, but Trump won't announce it now. But I wouldn't be surprised if they accepted that. 5, termination of all resolutions of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors. I agree. That seems reasonable to me. 6, 7, 8 is 6 and 7 get really concerning. And 8, 6, payments of compensation for Iran. I thought the Strait of Hormuz and the toll system, the fees there will be the payments. If they mean American payments of compensation to Iran, then it's a problem. But they didn't define it. They said compensation payments.
Right.
So it's broad enough to be fine with it. This is where it gets really bad. Number 7, withdrawal of American combat forces from the region. Now, Larry, before we get really upset, that's withdrawing American troops. I don't think they didn't say bases. So maybe that's not that bad of a thing. And last one, cessation of all fronts, on all fronts. So
Yeah, and it's still that leaves Hamas and Israel continuing to bomb Lebanon, unless there is a broader ceasefire. Yeah, there are too many I's not dotted and T's not crossed in this agreement. The other thing that's been reported and is that Iran and the United States will meet in Pakistan and again, I guess, negotiate through the intermediary as Pakistan on Friday to figure out coming up with an agreement. So there is, until they meet and actually come out and announce a joint announcement about an agreement, then I don't think there'll be a ceasefire.
Do you think there would be a ceasefire that doesn't include Hezbollah? Is that a possibility? Because there's a major war happening in the south of Iran and Lebanon that people are talking about.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think this is, Iran recognizes that they can't, if the Western intent is to try to separate them from Hezbollah, they made it clear that that's not going to happen either. Hezbollah and Iran together have paid too much in blood, and these again the Hezbollah folks, they're Shia Muslims that have been, they've been under assault by Israel now for at least 46 years.
Yeah, I'm just going through the terms again.
Sure.
Lebanon. Okay, so Al Jadid, Lebanon is part of the ceasefire, but nothing is certain yet. That's according to Al Jadid. So Lebanon has to be part of it. And Rashi said the following: for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. So they've opened the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, but it's basically that's what they got right now. In other words, you coordinate with Iran and you're one of Iran's buddies, you get through.
I told you that when they saying the strait is open, yes, you talk to us, you pay your fees, and you can come through. We won't blow you up. That's for Israel. That's for America. They're saying, hey, come on, just pay us our money so we can rebuild our civilization. Don't ever try to come through here without our permission. That's open. And people in America can't believe it. Trump has been humiliated, bro.
Will the same apply to U.S. ships or oil going to Europe?
Yeah, if they pay.
That may be one reason that Italian Foreign Minister or Prime Minister Meloni, that she's en route to Tehran to meet and to see if they can get a deal that can get the fuel, the gas and oil turned back on for Italy.
True. There's another report here came in. There it is. Negotiation between Iran and the US will begin in Islamabad on Friday regarding a permanent ceasefire. Apparently, the initial framework for these negotiations will be Iran's 10-point plan. So Iran's 10-point plan is the starting point.
Yeah. So that's where they're going to start, and they haven't. So they really haven't agreed on anything, and we'll see. I'd be skeptical of even Arachi announcing that.
What they agreed on was the United States and Israel wasn't going to get nuked. That's what the agreement is. And I'm telling you right now, it probably take a couple of days for the reports to come out that I'm going to show y'all. It's going to be some U.S. intelligence come out and it warning the U.S. that they probably was going to face a nuclear attack if they attacked Iran. They probably already seen the stages, the preparation from North Korea, China, from Russia. They wasn't playing with the U.S. and the U.S. and Israel probably was going to be nuked after 8 o'clock tonight if they went along with their move. The humiliation that's going on right now is nothing else. There's nothing else they could have agreed to. Trump is finished.
There's safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz because he didn't close it. It was closed by the IRGC, and the IRGC may say, no, we're not going to do that. We'll wait till we got a concrete agreement.
So let's look at each one. Get your thoughts on it, Larry. Commitment to non-aggression. That seems plausible, yeah?
Yeah. It's sensible.
Okay. Continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. Expected.
Yeah, and they're gonna, and Iran is smartly working that out, sharing it with Oman.
Acceptance of uranium enrichment. Do you think the US will accept uranium enrichment now?
No, but if I'm Iran, I don't care what the United States wants or thinks. This is Iran saying, I'm a sovereign country. I'm part of the NPT. I allow IAEA inspections. I'm doing everything that the international law requires. We're going to make the call then. They're not going to be held hostage by the Zionists.
All right. Acceptance, lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions.
Yep. That has to be done before again, if I'm Iran, you lift those sanctions first. Then we'll talk about opening the Strait of Hormuz. Because,
all right,
if they open it, then what incentive does the West have to lift the sanctions? And then it forces Iran to go back and then try to shutter the strait, which they can do, but then it puts them in the position being seen as the violator of an agreement.
Agree. Termination of all resolutions of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors. IAEA Board of Governors.
That should not be difficult at all.
All right. Payments of compensation for Iran. How would those payments look like?
Yeah, that one would probably be negotiated because they'll could come to the agreement that the payments, the ships coming in and out of the Persian Gulf, that they will be the payees, that money that will come to Iran because of that traffic will be its compensation.
That's what the Iranians are saying. That's how you see.
TaxAct has experts who can help you file your taxes, or they can just do it for you. And what's great about them?
Don't come through the Strait of Hormuz. You're going to pay us
bases, the ships.
$2 million.
You got the two Muse.
But do you think it doesn't? You said not just bases. You think it does include bases?
Yeah. Yes, it includes bases. I think the U.S. plan already is to reposition, withdraw from the region, and set up set up their bases back at Incirlik in Turkey.
And do you think Israel offered permission for the U.S. to have bases there?
Yeah, and they could. That would be sort of a workaround that they set up bases inside Israel. Again, which gets us back to, if Israel's not a signatory to the ceasefire, then if they continue attacking Iran, Iran's going to attack Israel. And if U.S. bases are co-located there, you get the U.S. Arguing that this is a violation of the ceasefire. So that gets messy.
I want to go back to the payments of compensation for Iran. Do you agree that this is a good point? They kept it vague. Iranians kept it vague because there's multiple ways that compensation could be paid.
Yeah. That's a good diplomatic tool. If it's really, really important, then you define it precisely. It's like the guy, he's standing on a beach and a lantern walks up and he starts polishing the lantern and a genie pops out and says, you've got one wish. I'll grant you one wish. And the guy thought and thought. He goes, I want to be on the beach with 3 scantily clad ladies. And the genie goes, your wish is granted. Guy opens his eyes. He's there on the beach with 3 80-year-old women wearing bikinis. Okay. So he didn't define the terms of the deal. He didn't make it clear. So that this is where you have to get some precision.
All right. So I've got more information for you, by the way, Larry. And we have a pretty large audience today. We've got between X and YouTube, probably the biggest audience we've ever had in any show. A lot of people are trying to get the information on this, on the latest developments. So we're giving you all the updates as they come in. Arashi put out a big statement, by the way. Statement on behalf of the Supreme National Council. On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, he, Prime Minister of Pakistan Sharif, and he, Field Marshal Munir. In response to the brotherly request of PM Sharif in this tweet, and considering the request by the US for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, I hereby declare on behalf of the Iran Supreme National Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with the due consideration of technical limitations.
Yeah, so that means Iran's still going to control who goes in and out. They may or may not impose a fee, and it's going to put the U.S. and Israel in the position of stopping attacks. Now, I don't see. Yeah, so you don't see. Iran's not the one seeking a deal here. I think that's clear.
Israel is still striking Lebanon as we speak. Come on. Don't do this. Don't do what you did to fucking Syria. We do that every fucking time. Come on. Iran and the US are not striking each other. Iran is not striking the Gulf. The US is not striking Iran. Like, come on.
No, Israel's like a rabid dog. If Trump's deal goes through, he could actually leave the Iranians hanging, which would be good. Iran then, if left to its own devices, would have to stop this. The United States has been the great enabler of the Iranians' genocidal tendencies. Just imagine if Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, had said about Israel what Trump said about Iran. It's going to be eliminated. We're going to eliminate that civilization tonight. That would be considered a genocidal threat.
Yeah. If Iran made that, like everyone's talking, Iran saying death to America, death to America. What did Trump just say about Iran? So you can't use rhetoric as an excuse anymore.
Yeah.
Iran could say death to America. Trump could say, let's annihilate Iran. Israel, let's say, I want to invade Lebanon. That's a new world order. But that's not, this should not justify an attack anymore. Breaking Al-Nusra ballistic missile launched from Yemen towards Israel.
Right.
The Houthis are striking Israel because Israel just struck Lebanon.
They're not gonna let Israel bully Lebanon. The Houthis and Iran not gonna do that. Iran not worried about, okay, I'm good now. Lebanon's still gonna be attacked. It's not gonna happen like that. And Israel gonna find that out. But Israel gonna make a way to keep the U.S. in this goddamn war. They will hit Trump they goddamn self and blame it on Iran. That might be what they do too.
So, yeah, like I said, until they actually stop shooting.
I tell you what,
and it's going to have to be Israel.
We got to worry about a false flag now here in America. Israel definitely do something. Then say Iran just trying to get some get back for the supreme leader. They want that nuclear war, goddamn it.
Well, that stops first, because right now Israel is one up on Iran, and Iran's retaliating, and Iran will continue to retaliate for every Israeli bomb or missile fired in its direction.
What is the likelihood this will break out again?
Pretty likely. Yeah.
Sorry, I rephrased the question. Sorry, because it'll break out again this year.
Oh, I think it'll break out again this month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you think will trigger it?
Israel's going to attack. They'll try to assassinate the new Ayatollah. They're not going to stop. The only way they'll stop is if the United States completely cuts them off, and the rest of the world cuts off Israel, shuns it. But China keeps doing business with them. India keeps doing business with them. Turkey keeps doing business with them. So as long as that nonsense goes on, Israel thinks he can get away with anything, and frankly, it has up to this point.
But do they have the capacity to continue the war?
No,
they agreed to this war very quickly.
Not by
and
themselves.
They weren't even just. What do you make of the fact that they were surprised by these negotiations? Does that show Trump maybe broke that stranglehold that many people thought, or Israel either had or people thought they had?
Yeah, well, it comes down to if you're the two survivors from the sinking of the Titanic, and there's only one lifeboat, who gets to go in it? And you decide, I'm going to save myself, not the other. And that's where I think Trump is trying to save himself, save his, and I think, frankly, his presidency is beyond the point of salvation. We'll see, though.
But how the polls, what happens with the polls?
Oh, the polls are, what's killing them is the price of gas. I just went out and filled up today. I get it at a discount by being one of these large buying clubs, but the price of gas now, it went from $2.54 the 28th of February to now it's $3.92. So $1.42, $1.40 roughly. It's gone up in price, and while right now the oil markets, the futures markets are reacting to, peace is at hand, the price has fallen. The actual price of those oil tankers when they come into port is more like $140 a barrel, and that's not going down.
Look, hopefully it continues heading in the right direction. We're going to continue the stream for another couple of hours. Larry, always a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much for sticking with us for the whole hour.
Hey,
I'd love to have you back if you got time.
I look forward to celebrating a hug with you when the joy breaks out, if it turns out to be real. But
I'll fly out and we'll hug. We'll finally hug. I haven't seen each other in person for a while.
Yeah, just keep a little bit of jaded skepticism as you continue to watch this unfold.
I need to learn to do that more. Well, thank you so much, Larry.
All right, my friend. Hey,
good
night.
You, sir.
Bye-bye.
For the audience, I'm going to read.
Imagine you are him. Like him, you want to be your best. Your Houston Methodist Sports Medicine team uses the latest treatment and technology to keep you strong. That's the difference between practicing medicine and leading it. For you, Houston Methodist, leading medicine.
Agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz during these 2 weeks.
Donald Trump has fully caved to all 10 of Iran's negotiating demands as Donald Trump was about to have his 8 p.m. Eastern deadline expire, where he said that he would obliterate the entire civilization of Iran. Iran didn't budge for weeks now. If you've been watching the Midas Touch Network, we've been saying Iran put forward a 10-point plan for its negotiating framework. The Trump regime put forward a 15-point plan for its negotiating framework, and Iran had always rejected the 15-point plan and said, we will only agree to a ceasefire or any deal with our 10 terms. And previously, the Trump regime said it was maximalist, that they would never agree to it, but Iran never budged. And moments ago, when Donald Trump announced that there would be a ceasefire, as we were hitting up against that 8 p.m. Eastern deadline where he said there would be total obliteration, Donald Trump confirmed that he would negotiate within the 10-point framework of Iran. Now, Iranian media is saying this is a crushing defeat for Donald Trump and the United States. I mean, as part of this 10-point framework, Iran gets to continue enriching uranium. It recognizes that Iran has full control over the Strait of Hormuz and will make $2 million per ship that passes. It recognizes that Iran gets to keep all of its ballistic missiles and drones. It recognizes that the U.S. must provide complete reparations to Iran. It recognizes that the U.S. must immediately abandon its military bases in the Middle East. Folks, this is a complete and utter capitulation by Donald Trump. And I don't want you to think I'm being hyperbolic. So let's just go through the language. Let's see what Trump said. Let's see what Iran said. Remember my reporting on this 10-point framework. I mean, for weeks now, Iran's been saying 10-point framework, 10-point framework. And what I've been saying here on the Midas Touch Network is the only way I could imagine that there would be a deal is if Donald Trump basically fully surrendered and agreed to all 10 points. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did here. Let me just go through the 10 points for you that Iran has been saying for weeks now. Number one, a commitment to non-aggression against Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Iranian Shiite groups in Iraq, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment, lifting all primary sanctions from Iran, lifting all secondary sanctions of Iran, termination of all UN Security Council resolutions, termination of all Board of Governor resolutions, payment of compensation to Iran, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, cessation of war on all fronts, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's always been the 10-point framework. So here's what Donald Trump said before as he announced the ceasefire. Now, Donald Trump and Hegseth and others from the regime may go on propaganda media like Fox and say, this was a win. Donald Trump's a negotiating master. This was a complete and utter surrender, the biggest wipeout in American history, period. The biggest loser of America ever historically. I'm trying to explain to you the gravity of the loss right here, because I know American media is going to be like, oh, a deal's been reached and look at the stock market. Folks, America just said, we are out. We are done. We lose. Utter surrender. Just watch what Donald Trump says. Here's his post. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Trump is saying the 10-point plan is a workable basis on which to negotiate. And that had all of those 10 features that I just read for you. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran. So Trump's saying there, he's already agreed to most of these 10 points that I just read for you. But a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America as president, and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, that's his statement. What we're also hearing about this ceasefire is China was very influential in working with Pakistan, and Russia was involved as well. And Donald Trump just tapped out. He agreed to all 10. And it's not like he said, well, it's not just that he said it was a framework to negotiate with them. He said that almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to already. So let's take a look at the statement from Iran's Supreme National Security Council, calling this a crushing defeat for the U.S., saying that they've been forced to accept their 10-point plan. Iran claims U.S. has agreed to continued Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, continued enrichment of uranium, war reparations, full reparations, and U.S. leaves its military bases in the region. Statement of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran on the 2-week ceasefire and negotiations. The enemy, in its unfair, illegal, and criminal war against the Iranian nation, has suffered an undeniable, historic, and crushing defeat. Thanks to the pure and sacred blood of the martyred leader of the Islamic Revolution, the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, may God bless him, the measures of the supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution and commander-in-chief, Grand Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini, and the efforts and bravery of the Islamic fighters on the fronts, especially the historic, lasting, and heroic presence of your dear people on the scene from the very first days of the war, Iran has achieved a great victory and forced the criminal America to accept its 10-point plan. In this plan, America fundamentally commits to guaranteeing non-aggression, continuing Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, accepting enrichment, lifting all primary and secondary sanctions, ending all Security Council and Board of Governor resolutions, paying compensation to Iran, withdrawing U.S. combat forces from the region, and stopping the war on all fronts, including against the heroic Islamic resistance of Lebanon. We congratulate all the people of Iran on this victory and emphasize that until the details of this victory are finalized, there is still a need for the perseverance and prudence of officials and the preservation of unity and solidarity among the Iranian people. Now, in Israel, their leaders are basically saying they're shocked and horrified that Trump made this decision. Israeli sources are telling their Khan News, we were surprised by Trump's decision. We received updates in the final moments when everything seemed finalized. They say that we are committed to a ceasefire. But I think, as we all know, the question is Israel, UAE, all these other countries that believed that they were going to be working with Trump to utterly obliterate Iran and knock it off the map, I think they're going to feel betrayed. So I think that they're going to try to figure out, how do we break this ceasefire? And here's what we're learning, right as these announcements are being made. It was being announced. We'll have to dig into what's happening. Purportedly now, ballistic missiles were launched from Iran towards Israel. Early warnings posted from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem areas. Whether that actually is happening or whether this is a pretext so that the ceasefire falls apart, I think there are going to be major efforts to try to break this ceasefire very, very soon. This is how it's being reported. Mere seconds after Trump announced what he calls a two-sided ceasefire with Iran, ballistic missiles launched against Israel by Iran have again been detected. Whether that happened or Israel saying they've been detected so that they can end the ceasefire, we have to dig in, but that's what's being reported. The UAE says it is actively engaging drones and missiles. So it claims that while the ceasefire is in place, Iran drones are striking UAE. Are they just saying that because they want to break the ceasefire, or is that really happening? Israel says it's detecting missile launching from Yemen. And meanwhile, Iran's military news is saying the orange pig chickened out again. We're seeing all of these taco memes yet again. Iran's Tasman state media says Trump has retreated. Israel's News 12 says Israel does not like this framework, to put it mildly, but Trump is calling the shots. So you can imagine what's going on behind the scenes right there. Going back to Foreign Minister Araghchi, here's the statement that he made as the foreign minister. Statement on behalf of the Supreme National Security Council of the Islamic Republic of Iran. On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, the Honorable Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sharif, and the Honorable Field Marshal Munir, for their tireless efforts to end the war in the region. In response to the brotherly request from Sharif in his tweet, and considering the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by Trump about accepting the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, I hereby declare on behalf of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. In other words, Iran now strongly controls the Strait of Hormuz, and it will be charging toll fees, $2 million. Now, the first day of these negotiations are supposed to technically take place now on Friday in Islamabad. We'll see how long this ceasefire holds, given the dynamic that I just expressed right there. But on Iranian TV, they are spiking the football. Trump has accepted Iran's conditions for ending the war, and a 2-week ceasefire has thus been declared. That's what they're saying in Iran. Now, right before the ceasefire was announced, we saw attacks by Israel and U.S. on a Iraq aluminum plant, one of Iran's largest aluminum production facilities, supplying material used in construction, automotive, and defense industries. And earlier we saw Iran retaliate against its neighbors in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, and other nations. So We're going to be keeping a close eye on this. But as we said on the Midas Touch Network, Iran is declaring victory after Trump agreed to a ceasefire, saying the U.S. adopted Iranian terms, and it's hard to see it any other way. Iran's leadership openly celebrating what it called a crushing defeat for the United States after Trump agreed to a 2-week ceasefire and acknowledged using Iran's own 10-point framework as the basis of negotiation. I mean, do you remember when Barack Ravid, Donald Trump's main news outlet over at Axios, said, remember, a U.S. official tells me Iran sent on Monday a 10-point response for a proposal to end the war. But the U.S. official said the response was maximalist and unclear if it will allow moving forward for a diplomatic solution. And then Trump adopted the whole thing. That's the truth. That's the news. Those are the facts. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. And thank you for
would be what has happened, because today we were talking about it and there was no sign of negotiations. I talked with Professor Marandi, I talked with Iranian, my Iranian friends in Iran. There was no sign of negotiations behind the scene. And today we've learned that Iran canceled all sort of messages to the United States. So the main question would be, what has happened? How did it happen? I think it goes beyond what has happened today, because you remember when Donald Trump started putting these sort of ultimatums, talking about 48 hours. He started with 48 hours, then 5 days, then 10 days, and we got back again to 48 hours. Then he said Tuesday at 8 p.m. So you may wonder what is going on, what has happened. Why did the United States decide to behave like this? I think the main answer or the main point would be what is going on the battlefield. On the battlefield, what is happening, mostly Israel is running out of interceptors. The United States is not able to help Israel defending itself. All those radars during this war were destroyed. The latest radars were in Israel. Right now in Israel, they literally have no major radars to defend Israel. This is one of the major issues right now for Israel. And we have to understand this war, the concept of this war comes from the Israeli government, comes from Netanyahu administration. They wanted this war for such a long time. So the United States has decided to, as you remember, Marco Rubio said that they wanted to attack Iran. So the Iranian response would be the attack on American bases in the region. So that's why the United States has decided to, attack Iran. And as Marco Rubio put, a preemptive attack. It wasn't a preemptive, it was an aggression on the part of the United States and Israel. But after all, during the war, Iran has managed to measure all these escalations on the part of Israelis and the United States. So they have decided, you remember in the initial days of the war, they went on with missiles, drones, they hit everything in the region. Basically, there is nothing to be used in the American bases in the GCC countries. So the only radars which were working somehow so far in the recent, in the last week was those radars in Israel and in Jordan. Iran has managed to destroy all of them. It seems to me that most of the radars were destroyed. In Israel, it was those critical radars were destroyed, as at least what we've heard so far. So look at this image that came out today. It shows that, one of these interceptors in Israel, a David Sling interceptor missile, is from the 2026 stockpile. It shows how critical is the situation with the interceptors. On the other hand, not only the interceptors and the radars that were destroyed, the United States is running out of cruise missiles, JASSMs, and that's why, the offensive power is reducing as well. So offensively and defensively, they're not capable to continue the conflict, to continue the war. So what would be the solution for that? Putting an ultimatum there, threatening Iranians, as Donald Trump tried to put it out, we're going to destroy the civilization. We're going to destroy everything in Iran. So the other problem was the intelligence. They couldn't reach, they couldn't manage to find the critical, when it comes to missile production, drone production, critical points in Iran to hit them. So what else could they do? Attacking universities, bridges. Even today we've learned a synagogue was attacked. Everything. They attacked everything. Hospitals, everything. All these, mostly civilian facilities were destroyed. Even pharmaceutical plants, all of this. So the question is, why did they do that? Because they didn't have the intelligence coming out of Iran. It's all, looking at the intelligence, looking at.
Contact Roberts Air for all your heating and cooling needs.
So what could be done to change the game? I think the last thing that the Trump administration tried to do was reach into Natanz, power plant in Isfahan, because they thought that they can go there and they can find the 460 enriched uranium, and they did some sort of raid in the southern part of Isfahan, which has totally failed. Many casualties in this operation. They didn't mention any of this. I don't know if there was, if some of these forces were killed, but it seems that there were many casualties, many wounded forces during this operation. This is the problem. The second problem that the United States has faced, it was the last, because as they were running out of interceptors and cruise missiles, so what can you do? B-2 bombers, they're still having B-2 bombers that going in Iran and hitting the targets, but they have to go deep inside Iran to hit the target. This is not possible, because they tried it before. We had the F-15E being intercepted by Iranian air defense system. They couldn't find the air defense. And these are mobile air defense systems. They go to the these underground cities. They come out and go inside, and nobody knows where are they located. Then the other point when it comes to the ceasefire is, you remember Donald Trump said 15 points. What were in those 15 points that the United States suggested to Iranians? It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a communication by Iranians. The United States tried to reach out to Iranians through the Pakistani government and sending them 15-point plan on the part of the United States. Basically, it was the total capitulation of Iranians. What was in that? Limitations on the ballistic missile program, no enrichment when it comes to the nuclear program, and they have to give up the Strait of Hormuz, to open it up, let it the way it was before the war started. basic points in those 15 points is the total capitulation of Iran. Iran said, no, we're not going to do that. So what did Iran do? They sent a counter plan to what the United States has suggested. Iran sent it 2 days ago to the United States. And since then, there was no communication. There was no, talks, negotiation, nothing. Just the Pakistani government was sending the messages from the United States and taking the message from Iran and sending that to the United States. So the final point on the part of Iran was sending this 10-point plan to the United States. And since then, there was no negotiation. There was no talk. That's why today, as we were talking about what has happened, what was going on, and there was no talks. I talked with Professor Morandi today. No talk, no negotiations. Because Iran said these 10 points should be satisfied or we're not going to talk with you. There has to be some sort of permanent solution to what's going on, to this war. And Donald Trump said on Tuesday, 8 p.m., I'm going to announce, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to destroy you. But what was happening in his mind, he tried to do his best. He thought that the Iranian would somehow, capitulate. They say, oh, we're going to back down. He's going to destroy us. He's going to use, nuclear weapons and destroy everything. He mentioned, he didn't mention nuclear weapons, but when you talk about, destroying a civilization, a conventional war is not capable of doing that. You have to go beyond that. You have to use nuclear weapons. Even J.D. Vance today in Hungary, he said that we have tools in our arsenal that haven't been used so far. So we may use them. They did everything. They did everything to put this sort of psychological pressure on Iranian government to force them into some sort of capitulation. That didn't work. So if it doesn't work, what would you do? Iran didn't do it. Iran, they were not trying to negotiate with the United States. They just sent a plan, 10-point plan to the United States. There was no negotiations. Then Donald Trump himself negotiated, he was negotiating with himself. Nobody was there to negotiate with him. Iran simply sent the plan to, you may understand this plan, you may agree with that, or we're not going to make any sort of deal, we're not going to talk with you. Donald Trump himself today decided to capitulate by accepting that he's going to negotiate based on the plan that Iran presented, Iran sent to the United States, 10-point plan. So the question is, what is in this 10-point plan? Basically, the plan, it mentions that Iran and the United States would never attack each other again. It basically means that the United States, together with Israel, it never, they would never attack Iran again. The first point. The second point is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, I think it was one of the, I would say it was a nuclear bomb. They attacked Iran to destroy Iranian capabilities, to do regime change, then destroy Iranian capabilities to produce nuclear bombs. But Iran, so far, what Iran has presented on the battlefield, they don't need nuclear bombs to defeat the United States together with Israel in the region. They don't need that. The nuclear bomb of this is the Strait of Hormuz. What is happening in the Strait of Hormuz? It's going to be under the control of Iranian government forever. And they're going to manage, they're going to, charge all of these tankers that are trying to passing through this Strait of Hormuz. They're going to pay $2 million per tanker, per vessel. So this is huge, because when it comes to reparation and when it comes to devastation, we know that this war is totally about devastation, death, and destruction, not only in Iran, but also in Israel as well. We don't have that much of coverage from Israel. Nobody's reporting what's going on in Israel. We see the missiles going there. mostly from outside, footage from outside those countries who are around Israel, who are taking some sort of photos, or we had a little bit of leakage of some media outlets sending, the destruction to some buildings, apartment buildings. But after all, we don't know what's going on strategically when it comes to these strategic, facilities in Israel. But hugely, Israel was hugely, the whole society was hugely influenced by this war. But the destruction is unbelievable. What's going on in Israel? Look at Haifa, Tel Aviv. You see some scenes of it's like Gaza when you look at what's going on in Israel. And coming back to the points of the Strait of Hormuz, I think the Strait of Hormuz right now is the most important gain on the part of Iranian, is the winning point on the part of Iranians. And the other point that was mentioned in 10-point plan is the Iranian right to enrich uranium on their soil. It's going to be this way. Iran going to enrich uranium on its soil. It's not going to be something different. That's why I think it's important. Ballistic missile, there is no talk about ballistic missiles. They're not even talking about limitation on ballistic missiles. It's not in this 10-point plan. All sanctions, primary and secondary sanctions, will be lifted from Iran. And it goes back to George Bush. And it's these devastating sanctions coming from, for many years, Iran's economy was under the sanctions from the United States. And I think it's going to be huge if they do something in that direction. The United States forces, they have to withdraw their forces from the region. The other point in this 10-point plan, compensation paid to Iran. I think finally we're going to learn that the compensation would be through the Strait of Hormuz, and what Iran would have, the gain that Iranian would have through the Strait of Hormuz, and the way that they're charging the tankers, all these countries that are passing through, that they're using this strait to pass through. Not only Associated Press, they reported just moments ago, reported that it's going to be managed by Iran and Oman. Basically, Oman is some sort of partner for Iran in that region because they're part of that area as well. But it's going to be run by Iranians together with Omanis. Omanis they're going to be together. And the other point, that war ends on all fronts. It means that the war is going to end not only between the United States and Iran, it's going to end between Israel and Hezbollah, and it's going to end in Gaza. So this is the tricky part, is this part, I think, because it's so difficult to control Israel when it comes to the southern part of Lebanon and Gaza. I don't know how capable is the United States to control the Netanyahu administration. But after all, looking at what's going on, I think many people are arguing these 2 weeks of ceasefire would make some sort of leverage for the United States. They want to build up, they want to get back, hit Iran harder, or maybe with new missiles. But that's not going to happen. Because the interceptor, the capabilities of the United States to produce these interceptors is limited. They cannot produce them. They could fight and produce these missiles, but it's not going to happen in 2 weeks. I think that nothing of that sort going to help the United States in 2 weeks. And it's going to take a lot of time to reproduce all of these missiles, cruise missiles, JASSMs, together with interceptors to be replaced or to be, sent again to Israel to get back to the fight. But the other point is, the situation is not only related to Iran, it's related to what's going on in the southern part of Lebanon as well, because Israel is getting, tanks, the forces are getting destroyed by Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been able to destroy tanks they don't have tanks. They don't have these heavy weapons. They don't have air defense system. But they know how to fight Israelis on the ground. And even they know how to hit the Israeli drones. This is the problem. What the Israeli media was reporting today, that they have underestimated the Hezbollah, the Hezbollah forces, or Hezbollah, sort of dominance in the southern part of Lebanon. But right now, the reality is hitting them, and hitting them hard. They're learning, the son of, his name, the Minister of Economy, Smotrich, his son was killed in the southern part of Lebanon. It shows how the situation is critical, and Lebanon knows how to defend itself. Considering all of that, again, coming back to Yemen and Ansarullah, they're not part of the game. They're not in the game. They're using 2-3 missiles, every other days, but that's all. They're not part of the game. Bab al-Mandab is not closed. So Iran didn't use all of this, all of the tricks, or all of its capabilities to go against the United States. The United States is running out of interceptors, running out of cruise missiles. So I think the negotiations, and some people are arguing that these negotiations are going to get back, the United States is going to attack Iran and again. I think that's huge. I doubt that, because if that happens, what else do they have to go against Iran? Even with the negotiations right now, before this war happening, the United States had some sort of leverage to put pressure psychologically, economically, militarily on Iran. If you don't reach an agreement with us, we're gonna attack you. We're gonna destroy you, sending these beautiful aircraft carriers, airplanes, 150 fighter jets going to the Middle East, sending them to Jordan. These are hugely, just imagine what was happening before this war started. They were putting a lot of pressure on the people of Iran, on the government, on the military, psychologically. So right now, this is not there. They don't have any sort of leverage right now. They cannot do anything. They cannot, intimidate Iran with the war, because Iran is in the war as we talk with the United States and Israel. They know what the war would be and what the war is, the reality of the war. The tragedy of what has happened so far, I think Donald Trump strategically has gained nothing. He has achieved nothing, but he's losing strategically. What he has achieved so far, it could be the death and the destruction in Iran and in Israel. This is the total, he has achieved that. He has destroyed many of these civilian buildings in Iran. He killed many people in Iran. This is the achievement of the Trump administration. This is what he has achieved. Nothing more than that. He has been defeated. He has been defeated strategically. Iran is not going to get, Iran is going to control the Strait of Hormuz forever. No limitation on Iranian ballistic missiles. Uranium enrichment on Iranian soil. That's going to happen. Iran would negotiate with the United States, I think, about the nuclear weapons. Iran is not interested in, going after nuclear weapons. They don't need it, because they have defeated the United States strategically in the region, together with Israel, without using nuclear weapons. This is the reality of what's going on today. And I think Iran has the upper hand in this negotiation. That's why the United States, we've seen that Donald Trump is, he posted that the negotiations are based on Iranian plan, 10-point plan. And then we had the foreign minister of Iran posting the same, and Donald Trump retweeting what the Iranian foreign minister tweeted. So just imagine what Mark Levin last night was talking about. He was talking about nuking Iran, destroying Iran using nuclear weapons. And look at what he said just moments ago.
What are we going to just leave them there? There's nothing that we can do, and we're going to wash our hands over that? That to me is morally very difficult to accept. And then what about the problem?
Yeah, let's stop here. When he's talking about the people of Iran, remember just with this raid, American raid on Iranian soil, they tried to do something to grab something in Iran, and enriched uranium, 460 enriched uranium, highly enriched uranium. And what has happened that we had General Kane in that briefing yesterday together with Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. When General Kane came to the podium, he was mentioning the details of this operation. They call it the rescue plan of the pilot, which was a totally false name for this operation. It was a raid. Then he said, when we got there, each and everybody in Iran with small arms, with a rifle, with anything they had, they shoot at us. They fired at us. This is the reality of what they're facing. Donald Trump was told that you're going to go there and free Iranian, you're going to liberate Iranian people. That's not the reality what they faced, this week with the raid on Iranian soil. This is the reality. I think the other point that Mark Levin was mentioning, that are you going to let Iranian people in the hand of this regime? So what is your responsibility of that? Is he afraid of Iranian people? Yesterday he was talking about bombing, using nuclear bombs against Iranian people. Right now he's just mentioning it. He's afraid of Iran. He wants to do something for Iranian people. This guy has an agenda, and the agenda is not American agenda, is Israeli agenda. I think it's obvious for all of us to understand how these people are manipulating, and they're part of the mainstream media and manipulating, and they're using the United States as a proxy against Iran in the Middle East. That's enough for the United States. I don't know how long the United States wants to sacrifice everything for Israel and what Israel is seeking for the greater Israel. What is that? Who's going to accept that? Is Israel capable of achieving that? No, they're not capable. It doesn't matter how many nuclear bombs they have. It doesn't matter. And here is what he said.
I was reading these statements. Hezbollah has killed more Americans than Iran directly. Hezbollah is Iran. Hezbollah is firing missiles into Israel by the hundreds still. And here we have a ceasefire that they've already broken. And so, yes, the argument will be, well, they don't have control of this and control of that. Well, if they don't have control of this and control of that, how do we even enter into an agreement? There's a lot of complicated issues.
You remember that there was a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. Israel was attacking over and over Lebanon and destroying everything, killing people. This guy is arguing that Hezbollah is going to break the ceasefire, which was the case for Israel. Israel was doing this before this war happening. They were attacking, they were killing civilians, destroying everything in the southern part of Lebanon, in Beirut, in Dahiyeh, in those parts of Lebanon. So somehow mentioning that, so if this war ends and you find some sort of solution for this war, we're going to let, Hezbollah to be, Hezbollah is not going to be defeated. Hezbollah is a resistance in Lebanon. As long as you're occupying the southern part of Lebanon, Hezbollah are going to fight back. They're going to get their territory back. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight. And they're not going to, I think it's a total win for the acts of resistance. I think the acts of resistance is learning something that was not there before this war started. The Iraqi resistance was not there. Nobody knew about the Iraqi resistance, the Iraqi Hezbollah. But since day one, they were part of this operation. They were fighting the United States. Look at what has happened to American embassy in Iraq. One of, the biggest embassy, it's a huge embassy in Iraq that was destroyed. Everything was destroyed in Iraq. Nothing there for the United States to get there. Look at what has happened in Iraq. All these NATO countries, they had their forces in Iraq for such a long time. They all withdrew from Iraq. So no NATO forces, no American forces. Iraq is free after all. They have a new life coming to the scene for the Iraqi people. Fresh air coming to Iraq, I think. This is the difference. That's why they were fighting since day one to get with Iranians. The acts of resistance is going to get stronger. It's going to get bigger. I think what's going on in the GCC countries, and this is a huge defeat for them. For such a long time, they have paid everything with American bases in the region. They have lost all of those. The United States has failed. Donald Trump has failed to defend them during this war because his main concern was Israel. His main concern was to do regime change in Iran. He never meant to defend any of these Arab states in the Persian Gulf. So this is the reality. Are these countries going to learn from what has happened so far? Nobody knows. But Iran is not going to let American forces to get back to the bases. No American forces getting back, no bases in the Persian Gulf. The United States has been removed from GCC countries. They're not going to get back. Of course, they can have these, CIA agents, all of that. It happens everywhere. But militarily, they've been removed from the region. If they go to Israel, if they build a new base in Israel, that's not going to help Israel, I think. Because this war of attrition that Iran has engaged in is something different. The United States doesn't know how to fight a war of attrition. It happened in Ukraine as well. Russia defeated the whole NATO in Ukraine just fighting a war of attrition. Nothing more than that. They don't have a rush. They don't need to go to destroy, Ukraine. That's why they didn't assassinate Zelensky. They didn't assassinate none of Zelensky's commanders. That's why, looking at the western part of Ukraine, it's mostly intact. Russia didn't destroy anything. The war basically was fought in the eastern part of Ukraine. But look at what is happening in Iran. The United States, when they were running out of the targets, what did they do? They destroyed everything. Everything. Hospitals, schools. I think the name of all of these buildings, facilities, they're going to prepare a list to see. We're going to see what the United States did so far. This is not the war. You want to fight a war, you fight the war on the battlefield with the military of Iran, hitting the targets, the military targets in Iran, not hitting civilians. The civilians, you're talking about liberating, helping Iranian people, while you're, on the other hand, you're hitting the civilians, you're destroying, pharmaceutical plants. This is so ugly. I think the United States has not gained anything. It was a strategic defeat for the United States. And Iran is not afraid anymore of a new war. If the war, let's assume 2 weeks of negotiations, ceasefire. If they decide to get back again to the war, Iran is prepared for that. They have the time to build up. Iran has the time to build up its military, to repair, to do whatever they have to do in the country. So it's not
Israel and the U.S. going to be trying to rearm and regroup. China and Russia then already told Iran, don't worry about it. They finna fill them up with all the supplies they need to continue this war if they want to. If the U.S. and Israel try to continue this war,
going to be.
I'm pretty sure Russia and China told Iran, don't you worry about it. We finna resupply you, rearm you. This is real bad news now. North Korea could get more weapons there, but the U.S. they needed this. Other than this, it just would have been nuclear war.
Winning point for the United States is going to be something in the middle. They have to understand, they have to reach a deal. What we're going to see on Friday, we've learned that J.D. Vance going to negotiate in Islamabad, in Pakistan, together with Israeli agents, I would say, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. They're going to be with J.D. Vance. But in my opinion, the main negotiator would be J.D. Vance, because Iranians, they don't trust. They don't want to talk with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. These people are not, nobody would believe that these people are seeking for some sort of sanity, some sort of ceasefire, some sort of permanent ceasefire or permanent solution to what's going on. Every time they were negotiating with Iranians, they were going to Israel. They were reporting to Israelis before reporting to the United States, to the president of the United States. This is the problem with the United States. This is a huge problem. These are not diplomats. They don't know how to negotiate. At least J.D. Vance has some sort of dignity. Let's assume that J.D. Vance he's going to be, he wants to be the next president of the United States. This is the golden moment for J.D. Vance to make something. If he fails, that's going to be devastating, not only for him, but for 2028. And I think that would be the end for J.D. Vance. But he has this golden moment, golden opportunity to change the game, to bring something new to those people who voted for Donald Trump, who had some sort of hope in Donald Trump and MAGA movement that would change the foreign policy, domestic policy in the United States. J.D. Vance can change, not only negotiating with Iranians, making some sort of solution in Iran, then going to Ukraine as well. You have to put an end to these endless wars. That's not going to help the United States. And I think this is the end. Let's see what would happen with these negotiations. We have 2 weeks of negotiation. Are they going to extend that? It seems, I think mostly that's possible. Let's see what would happen. Thank you so much. I tried to give my understanding of what's going on and what is happening in Iran. Iran didn't change. Iran didn't negotiate. Iran just sent a simple plan to the United States if they're willing to negotiate. That's why Donald Trump has decided. They put ultimatum out there. He has decided. He negotiated with himself. He negotiated with the paper that Iran sent to him. And after all, he decided, I have some sort of solution. Ceasefire is coming. That's all. That's all. Thank you so much. And see you soon. See you tomorrow.
It is April 7th, 2026, and we are closing out the day here with breaking news as it's just after 8 p.m. local time here in Texas. And we have President Trump saying that the U.S. has agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. We are expecting to see negotiations begin in Pakistan starting on Friday. Now, Trump is obviously happy because he got Iran to agree to a ceasefire before his grand 8 p.m. Eastern deadline that he has been promoting over the last few days, even going as far to say that if Iran didn't agree to a deal, that there would be an all-out genocide and an end to their civilization. But on Iran's end, they are also framing this as a victory, saying that they got the U.S. to agree to their 10-point list of demands. And I want to highlight a few of those here. That includes a commitment to non-aggression, a continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, an acceptance of uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary sanctions, lifting of all secondary sanctions on Iran, termination of all UN Security Council resolutions, termination of all Board of Governors resolutions, payment of compensation to Iran, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, and a cessation of war on all fronts, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. But how long is this going to last when we know that the U.S. cannot be trusted here, and we know that the U.S. would not agree to a single one of those 10 points willingly, at least for the long term? Well, we got into all of the latest and where this conflict stands with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Brian Berletic, a geopolitical analyst, former U.S. Marine, and host of the New Atlas. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Great to have you back on the show. And I'm glad I get a chance to talk to you right now because I know that we are following the breaking news that the U.S. and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with plans to begin negotiations in Pakistan on Friday. Now, Trump is obviously framing this as a victory because he finally got Iran to agree to the ceasefire that he's been begging for multiple weeks now. But Iran is also framing this as a victory, with the Iranian Supreme National Security Council saying that they got the U.S. to agree to their 10-point plan, which includes control over the Strait of Hormuz, the recognized right to enrich uranium, the promise to lift all sanctions, and an end to all hostilities across the region, which is supposed to include against Hezbollah in Lebanon. We can get into that. But I know that neither one of us are exactly holding our breath or trusting the U.S. here. So how do you see this kind of promise of a deal and this 2-week ceasefire?
Well, of course, a lot of people will reflexively say this is a big mistake for Iran to agree to any sort of ceasefire. But from Iran's point of view, people have to try to see it this way. It's not the same as Russia and its military operation in Ukraine. Iran, since this all began, was simply reacting and retaliating against aggression against Iran. And if the United States and Israel cease their aggression, then what would compel Iran to continue firing missiles back or hitting infrastructure across the region if their infrastructure is not under fire? And they've made this point before the war started. If you attack us, we will attack you back. If you don't attack us, we're not going to attack you back. So they made that point very clear, and that's what this really looks like to me. They don't have the ability to wipe out Israel. They don't have the ability to defeat the United States. The U.S. is on the other side of the planet. They're projecting military power into the region. So Iran really does not have the capability to solve this problem at its source. The only thing Iran can do, and myself and many others have pointed this out all along, is survive. That is how they will win. That is how they will prevail, by simply surviving. In 2 weeks, if it even holds, they can do a certain amount of repairing, rebuilding, rearming. The U.S. almost certainly is going to use the 2 weeks to do this. So that's one way of looking at it. I mean, I'm looking at the list right now of the points that Iran says need to be met in order for them to agree to any sort of permanent deal. None of these, not even one of these, is something the U.S. is going to commit to. And again, we shouldn't have to point this out. We've already been here twice in just 2 years. The U.S. negotiating, using negotiations as both cover for preparing for a war of aggression, and also as a justification for a war of aggression, saying, we tried to negotiate with Iran, they were unreasonable, they left us with no choice. And again, I hate to keep bringing this up, but it is per US policy papers that have been public since at least 2009. There's an entire paper by the Brookings Institution, in case people haven't heard me mention it before, Which Path to Persia from 2009, Brookings Institution. People should look at that paper and at least read the table of contents and realize the US, all throughout this 21st century, has gone down the list of the table of contents in this paper and have implemented each one at least once now. The US has done every single one of these at least once. And they are going to continue doing this. And in that paper, they talk about negotiations, not as a means of achieving peace or avoiding war, but as a means of justifying war. They were talking about diplomacy as a means of allowing the US to justify attacking, invading Iran, and depict Iran as having brought it upon themselves. It literally says that in the paper, they brought it upon themselves, make it appear that they've done so. There's also, and now this is what I would warn people about most of all. There's an entire chapter titled Leave It to Bibi. And essentially, it's an entire chapter about using Israel as a disposable proxy to provoke and fight a war on behalf of the United States, suffer all of the consequences and retaliation of doing so, including all of the blame. And then the US being relatively, having relatively clean hands. And we watched them do that twice now. Last year, they literally had Israel attack first and make it appear as if they somehow dragged the US into this war that the US has always been preparing for all along since the 1970s. And then they did it again this year. Every time something was hit, every time there was an escalation, oh, Israel did it. And we didn't want them to, but they did it. And now the thing that I'm warning about is them doing this again, pretending to seek peace with Iran, and then Israel posing as the spoiler, when Israel depends completely on the United States for all of its military activity. Couldn't conduct any military operation without complete and constant US support. And what I'm warning about is the US will pose as making peace with Iran, and then Israel will carry out a strike. It could even carry out a nuclear strike because, and I'm sure you've noticed this at least the last day, the Western media is talking about the US at least using nuclear weapons against Iran. I found that very shocking how casual they were. Oh, President Trump might be thinking about using nuclear weapons on Iran. Wouldn't it be perfect for the US if they wanted to use nuclear weapons to pretend to seek peace with Iran and then have Israel carry it out? And then the US say, well, we wanted peace and Israel did this all on their own. So don't blame us. They did it. But coincidentally, Iran's been wiped off the map. Isn't that nice how that all worked out for us? So people have to be very, very, very careful about this. I'm already seeing all kinds of well-intentioned people seizing on this because this is news they want to hear. They want to imagine that Iran had some spectacular victory over the United States. But as we were just mentioning before the show, the US is fighting Iran as part of a wider global war on multipolarism. Right now, the US is escalating against Russia. They're not just still fighting their proxy war against Russia, it is escalating dangerously, and they're still continuing to prepare for an equally unnecessary, very similar war with China. And so they're not going to make peace with Iran while they're still doing these other activities in pursuit of primacy. They're only putting it on pause at best. At worst, they're trying to distance themselves from an unprecedented escalation, including the possible use of nuclear weapons by Israel.
Yeah, and I think that those are really important points to keep in mind, because that is something that I was wondering while kind of watching this back and forth and just updates we've been getting is, what about Israel? Because I know people have said, look, if there's going to be a deal, Israel has to be included in it, right? If we want to have a nuclear deal, have Israel be a part of that, make them go through nuclear inspections as well. Let's be fair and honest about this. But Israel's not going to be fair or honest, and I don't expect them to bring an end to their genocide against the Palestinians or their renewed genocidal war against the Lebanese civilians. I mean, it has been horrific what Israel has been doing. And you have the US in this position where, as you were noting, I mean, Trump's rhetoric saying, oh, tonight, this civilization will die. I mean, it is horrific to read some of these statements, and you look at Trump and you go, are you threatening a nuclear attack? And then you look at Vice President J.D. Vance, and he's over here saying, oh, well, there are some big tools that Trump hasn't decided to use yet against Iran that he could use. Doesn't that kind of tell us that they are at least trying to get the public desensitized to some sort of a nuclear attack? And what are your concerns when it comes to people that become complacent thinking, oh, we've got a deal, we've got a 2-week ceasefire, this war is over, when, as you noted, the US and Israel have a very long history of kind of playing this game of good cop, bad cop, and they continue to do so.
Exactly. And as you just mentioned, Israel is carrying out genocide against the Palestinians, and they're systematically exterminating people across southern Lebanon. And of course, as they do that, they bomb targets across all of Lebanon. And they participated in every single U.S. war, proxy and direct war across the region, again, all throughout the 21st century, including the current war of aggression against Iran. And as I point out, people act as if Israel is some sort of independent actor. Every warplane that they fly is an American-made warplane. Every weapon they drop on people, whether it's on Gaza, southern Lebanon, or Iran, these are American weapons. Even the weapon systems Israel claims they developed themselves. If you look into it, it's jointly developed with U.S. arms manufacturers. Israel is a forward operating base of the United States empire in the Middle East. That is what it is. That's what it was created to do from the very beginning. And from its inception until today is completely dependent on the United States. If the U.S. said, we want peace with Iran, and you're going to go along with it, and then if you don't, Israel does not have the ability to just independently continue pursuing war against Iran. It could not even carry out these airstrikes against Iran without the immense aerial refueling capabilities the U.S. provides. Israel has aerial refueling tankers, but they have a handful of them. Nowhere near enough to carry out the scale of operation that we have been watching launched against Iran over the last month plus now. So they are physically incapable of waging war on their own against anyone, even Gaza, even the Palestinians. They're incapable of doing that without complete and constant U.S. support, not just political support, but monetary support and military support. The U.S. military is in Israel overseeing this all, just like they're in Germany overseeing the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. That's admitted. It's admitted in the Western media. And so people have to keep that in mind. They want to believe, and again, this just confounds me without limit. People believe that somehow the U.S. was dragged into this war by Israel, when this is a war that is simply a continuation of what the U.S. has done since its inception. It has expanded, taken land, and exterminated the people living on that land and extracting the resources out from under it. They did it from the East Coast to the West Coast, across the Pacific, into Asia. After World War II, they dug into Europe and Central Asia, everywhere. They've been everywhere. And this is just a continuation of it. It's connected to all the other wars the U.S. is currently right now waging around the globe. It's not just waging a war against Iran. It's essentially occupying and controlling Venezuela. It's still waging war against Russia and Ukraine. It is carrying out dirty wars all along China's periphery. It's doing all of these things at the same time. Did Israel force them to do that? So it's important for people to zoom out, because they are going to use this narrative. And you're talking about nuclear weapons, and I agree. This is not something they would have brought up unless they were trying to desensitize. So yes, absolutely, that's why they're talking about it, to begin desensitizing people to it, talking about destroying power plants, erasing civilization. You don't say these things without a purpose. I pointed this out many times. President Trump is not in charge of anything. If you got him by himself and gave him real difficult questions, he couldn't answer a single one of them in regards to where Iran is on a map, its capital, the language that people speak, anything about the country, or even the war that's taking place. Without him being coached and told what to say, he couldn't answer any of those questions. He's not making these decisions. And when he's writing these posts, however outrageous they are, he's not just do people picture him typing on a keyboard? And that's not how it works. All of these politicians, the higher you go, the more people you have on your social media team doing this for you, not sitting there doing it yourself. So it's actually messaging. It's messaging from the US establishment. And they're doing it through President Trump. And again, it's this compartmentalization that they do politically, and we've watched them do this 4 to 8 years, all throughout the 21st century. Oh, that was Bush. Bush did that. Obama had nothing to do with it. He's cleaning up Bush's mess. Oh, no, those are Obama's wars. You can't blame that on Trump. Trump's doing what he can to clean up Obama's mess. And you'll hear Trump almost daily. Well, this is all because of Biden. I'm just cleaning up Biden's mess. It's compartmentalization. It's one single agenda that is going to continue no matter who is in office, no matter who controls Congress. But they compartmentalize all of the blame, all of the consequences. They compartmentalize it with these administrations. And then when they're out of office, they flush it down the tubes with them and they get a fresh start. And us, by playing along with this political theater, we're enabling that. And if you just point out this is continuity of agenda, and there are US corporations, interests, big, powerful interests in the US driving all of this, you expose them and you put them on the spot, they can't get away with it anymore. And again, we're talking about the potential use of nuclear weapons. And again, by the way, it's not President Trump just one day waking up and thinking, oh, maybe I'll use nuclear weapons, and this is unprecedented. The US is the only country on earth in human history to use nuclear weapons against another nation, and they did it twice. And they did it to Japan long after it was defeated. I think they had one single capital ship left in their entire fleet, physically incapable of threatening the United States, and the US dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. So these are all things that I think people need to keep in mind as this recent episode of political theater unfolds.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder to look back at the context, right? Because I know a lot of people just want to live in the moment and the news that they're hearing right now. I did think it was notable going back to Iran's decision to accept this ceasefire, because there's been back and forth, right? We've obviously had the US, the Trump administration, asking for a ceasefire for weeks now, according to reports, reaching out to Iran. Iran has said no. Now you have Iran's Supreme National Security Council in their statement saying that this does not signify the termination of the war, and that, quote, our hands remain upon the trigger, and should the slightest error be committed by the enemy, it shall be met with full force. So when you look at Iran and what they have been able to accomplish over the last 6 weeks, I mean, it has been pretty fascinating to watch, as according to the New York Times, they have made 13 US military bases in the region uninhabitable, right? As they have targeted the US in the region, as they've targeted Israel and so on and so forth. Do you think that Iran has done enough to teach the US a lesson in the slightest, to get the US to back off and to focus on another pillar of the multipolar world? Or is this just about the US kind of getting what it can? If it can get a 2-week pause, it's going to get a 2-week pause and then prepare for the next phase of this war?
It's a good question. The United States is not going to give up on toppling Iran, because if it gives up on toppling Iran, disrupting the flow of energy out of the Middle East, especially to China, that complicates its entire pursuit of global primacy, which it's not going to do. Who thinks that the US is actually going to, for its entire existence, it has pursued global primacy? What makes people think now this is the moment where just suddenly on a dime, they just turn completely around in the opposite direction? It's not going to happen. So they're going to use the ceasefire just like they used Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. They're going to use it to buy time and space to reorganize, recalculate their approach, and continue. And I warn people all the time, again, you say people are living in the here and now. You have to think in the 4th dimension of time, past, present, and future. Look at what the United States did to Iraq. It didn't overthrow Iraq in one single military operation. They weakened, undermined Iraq and Iran since the 1980s. Proxy wars pitting Iraq against Iran in the 1980s. In the 1990s, Operation Desert Storm. And then from Desert Storm to 2003, the US was periodically bombing, degrading, undermining, arming subversion groups engaged in subversion inside of Iraq, the economic sanctions, the killing of 500,000 children. We remember former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright saying it was worth it if it meant stopping non-existent weapons of mass destruction they knew Iraq didn't have. So this is the face of America foreign policy this entire time, and it's uninterrupted. It is continuous. And it doesn't matter who the face is today selling it to us or what rhetoric they're using to sell it to us. It is this continuous agenda that persists to this day, and it's not going to change overnight. Now, Iran has weathered everything the US threw at it. It hasn't done it without cost to itself. You can see what the US has done. They've struck at civilian infrastructure. They openly brag about it. Oh, we blew up a bridge. Oh, we hit their gas field. Oh, well, Israel hit it. We told them, no, don't do that, even though we refueled their airplanes on the way and the way back. But they did that. But anyway, we did that. And you see them hitting all of this infrastructure in Iran. That costs Iran. It's going to take them years to rebuild that. Their military power, they need to start, they have been trying to rebuild that even as the conflict continues. So people can't really blame Iran. They don't have, like I said in the beginning, they don't have the ability to physically destroy the entire US presence in the region. They can complicate it. They can raise the cost for the US to maintain that presence. They can't wipe Israel off the map, but they can raise the cost significantly for Israel. And it's interesting, just at the point the interceptors are running out and you see video after video of Iranian ballistic missiles just plunging straight into Israel, now suddenly they want a ceasefire. This is exactly what they did last year. And they only did it to buy time and space to recalibrate. People have to understand the US has the ability to project military power into the Middle East and attack Iran without ever coming into range of any of their ballistic missiles. They can do that. It'll impact the intensity and duration of the conflict, but they're still capable of doing that. So they'll just go back to subversion politically within Iran, and they will just begin preparing the next wave of outright direct aggression and maybe preparing Israel to carry out aggression by proxy, up to and including the use of nuclear weapons. This is what we have to keep an eye on. And again, it's different. If Russia agreed to a ceasefire in Ukraine, the US and Europe would immediately move European troops in. They've prepared troops specifically for doing that. And then if Russia could say our fingers on the trigger, but when they pull the trigger, now they will be fighting Europe directly. Iran doesn't have that problem. So they're in a position where everything they've been doing up until now, over the last month, they can continue doing that at a moment's notice. So it's different. People need to understand and appreciate those differences.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important point to keep in mind, right? These different conflicts and how the U.S. is looking at it. I know the U.S. comes in, they go, oh, we got a ceasefire. Another interesting point here is, of course, the control over the Strait of Hormuz, because before this specific war, you didn't exactly have Iran projecting power over the strait in the way that they are now, where they're literally coming in and saying, no, we own this. If you want your ship to come through, you can pay us. You can pay us in the currency that we choose, and we're going to take that money and put it towards our rebuilding fund for all of this damage that you were noting was caused by the US and Israel in this war. And I know that, I was listening to Vice President J.D. Vance earlier today, and he was saying, well, we just want the free trade of, oil and gas and other commodities in the world. That's all we care about. I'm like, yeah, you cared about that so much that you went and waged a war against Iran and kind of forced their hand, forced them to shut down the Strait of Hormuz to make you at least pay attention to what they had power over. How do you view the Strait of Hormuz here and kind of Iran's position of now being able to project more power, even as, yes, they are still dealing with and preparing for what the US and Israel are going to throw at them next?
The closure of the strait was something Iran warned everybody they would do if attacked. And they held off in the past doing it. And people should think about this too. The US tries to depict Iran as some sort of radical regime, out of control, extremists detached from reality. But in fact, they have been the most rational, patient, and measured party in this entire conflict. Again, the US itself went halfway around the world to start with Iran, thousands of miles from American shores. People should remember that. And they only did it this time because this was the most egregious episode of aggression the US has launched against. So it's unfair to call this a specific war. It is one large war the US has been waging against Iran. This is just the most recent and most egregious episode of it. And yes, they have this capability to complicate the flow of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. They've demonstrated that. And so this is a lever that that they're able to use. And the US obviously wants to take that away from them. And so people should just think in 2 weeks, is the US going to enhance its ability to take that lever away from Iran, or is Iran going to be able to enhance its ability to exercise this lever if this conflict continues? People should really think hard about that. The other thing is, it's impacting the entire global economy. I'm in Southeast Asia. It's impacting the economy here already, and it's just beginning. And even if the conflict did completely stop today, the effects of what has been happening are still going to reverberate into the next weeks and even months. And again, people have to remember there was production that was damaged or destroyed in the region. Iranian energy production and energy production across the Persian Gulf Arab states. That will take months, maybe a year or more to repair and get back online. So that's going to already have an impact. Who does that really benefit the most? It benefits the United States. And they openly bragged about it. We're energy independent. Everyone else is dependent on either us or the Middle East. And so when you do this, you have a country that openly desires global primacy. You're not going to get it by out-competing the rise of the multipolar world. They're going to achieve this by dragging the multipolar world down. How do you do that? By crippling the global economy. So in a lot of ways, this kind of has benefited the United States. Vice President J.D. Vance, he can say all he wants. So that's all we care about. Even as the New York Times admits, it's the U.S. military and CIA sinking tankers of the Shadow Fleet. American, European proxies are seizing these ships. So they're doing their own blockade of shipping all around the globe. Off the coast of Venezuela, they were openly doing this. And then they're complaining about the Strait of Hormuz. So again, it's more narrative, it's more political theater, it's more about also retroactively justifying the war. Because as you pointed out, as everyone has pointed out, the Strait was completely open up until the US launched this war. So that's all you cared about. You shouldn't have launched a war of aggression based on another pack of weapons of mass destruction lies. Like, it shouldn't have done that, and the Strait would have remained open if that's what you really cared about. So what Vice President J.D. Vance is doing is admitting he's an accomplice to all of this. He's justifying it. He's trying to rationalize it. And so for people out there who think somehow he's the voice of reason, no, he's just one of many doing this, involved in this. And people have to remember, maybe he was critical of sending weapons to Ukraine or to Iran. But if you remember the rest of that story, the reason why he didn't want weapons going to either one of these conflicts is because he wants to wage a much larger, more dangerous, equally unnecessary war with China. He said that even before the 2024 elections. People need to keep all of this in mind. The U.S., its foreign policy is as a global wrecking ball. That's what it's doing. And when the global economy is impacted, undermined, destabilized, they can pretend like that's their biggest concern, is getting that back on track. But if you really think about their overall objective, it's serving their interests. It couldn't serve their interests better.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to watch, as I know, at J.D. Vance, right, in the same sentence, then he turns around and he's talking about, the tools we can use against Iran. And I'm like, okay, so you're threatening nuclear weapons while at the same time claiming, we just want freedom of navigation, which is very on par for the U.S. establishment as a whole. The last thing I want to get into is we're kind of keeping an eye on where things go from here. We're kind of warily watching the next couple of weeks. I know we've got negotiations that are supposed to start in Pakistan. And so there's going to be that question of what is said and kind of how this is carried out. And obviously, I mean, Donald Trump can turn on a dime. The U.S. establishment doesn't turn on a dime, as you've noted, right? They have their same direction, but we're all kind of watching Trump to see what in the world he says. What are you keeping an eye on when it comes to Russia and China and this U.S., I don't even want to say pivot, because it's not really, it's just, we're going to focus on, whether it's Russia today, Cuba tomorrow. What are you kind of keeping an eye on as we go into the next week?
I think it's really important for people to zoom out and look at the big picture. You should be looking, keep in mind, Venezuela is still politically captured by the U.S. The U.S. is openly threatening to overthrow the government of Cuba. They're strangling it with a blockade right now. They're destroying Cuban civilization right now. And they're talking about erasing Iranian civilization. They're openly and deliberately trying to destroy civilization on the island nation of Cuba. People should keep an eye on that. Look at the war the US is waging against Russia and Ukraine and how it has been escalating. Look at the continued US military buildup in the Asia Pacific region and the encouragement by the United States of its proxies, Japan, the Philippines, the separatist administration on the island province of Taiwan. Look at how they are continuing to build that up, escalate that, trying to provoke a conflict there as well. If you zoom out and you look at the big picture and you see this spot, Iran is right in the middle of all of it. Is the central pillar for all of these other things that the US is still openly and 100% committed to. That should tell you they are still 100% committed to war with Iran, because it's not just war with Iran, it's war with the multipolar world. They have openly said they will use strategic sequencing. They will use a division of labor between themselves and their proxies, European proxies, Asia Pacific proxies. They're going to do all of these things. So they've said it, they're openly doing it, and all you have to do to verify it is zoom out. Don't be sucked in by the rhetoric and the political theater and be myopically laser focused on any one conflict. If you zoom out and look at the big picture, you can see how it's all connected. And that is a reminder, a warning that this is nowhere near finished. And if anything, it'll only escalate more dangerously.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the point that you made earlier about the fact that the US is not agreeing to, everlasting peace with Iran. They're agreeing to a ceasefire for the moment, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be looking for every other avenue to target Iran, especially when it comes to those possible social movements, when it comes to arming separatists in the region. That's something that the US relies on as kind of their bread and butter when they typically are not in these hot wars like they have been in recent weeks. So I know that there is going to be a lot to continue to keep an eye on, and I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down all of the latest here. Brian Berletic, a geopolitical analyst, former U.S. Marine, and host of the New Atlas. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series.
Based on the conversations with those from Pakistan, and wherein they requested that a hold off the destructive force of being sent to Iran and subject the Islamic Republic, agreeing to a complete, immediate, safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. I suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire, so no monumental attack. We could have envisioned what scale that might have been at, but obviously some good news as they are working toward negotiation. Let's be joined right now here by retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, Senior Fellow, and military expert at Defense Priorities, Daniel Davis. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And we're still digesting what this means, because we were less than 45 minutes away from this 8 p.m. Eastern deadline. Is this a step in the right direction?
Oh, without question, it is. I mean, anything that prevents this war from escalating, going up any further, it should be celebrated. Absolutely. I mean, as you and I were talking a minute ago, we still haven't heard any official reaction from Tehran yet. So, we'll I guess hold off on too much celebration at the moment. But the fact that President Trump said this was negotiated with Pakistan, and he listed them by name and said he's going to hold off 2 weeks. But right now, the initial attack is not going in, and every chance you get for diplomacy should be seized on with two hands. And so I'm very eager to see this opportunity. But we also need to be sober-minded that there are a lot very, very difficult issues that have to be resolved on both sides of this ledger for it to actually result in any kind of long-term peace.
It's the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. How possible, how likely is that? Because it is an international waterway.
That depends entirely upon the desire of Iran, because they have to agree to do that. They're the ones that have control of it right now, and the ones that have to allow traffic to go out of it. So that's certainly the number one question is. That's why I want to see an agreement by them to say, yes, we're ready to let traffic go through. President Trump in that Truth Social says it is complete and total opening of the Strait of Hormuz. That's what he said. And if that's the case, that's obviously going to be great for markets as well. So that's something that we're going to be looking to see. But that's one of the first things we want to find out. Does the traffic actually open up? And that's what everybody's going to be looking for first.
Yeah, that is so very true. And of course, we are getting some new information right now here, Daniel, about Iran and their perspective. This coming in from Meg Kennard with the AP saying the Iran Supreme National Security Council says it has accepted a 2-week ceasefire in this war. So it appears that both sides, at least right now, on the same page. But as we talk about all of these conflicts in different portions of the world, in Ukraine, in Israel, and now the Middle East with Iran, the ceasefire in place, how delicate is it, and what are you watching out to see if it holds for this 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's going to be the big issue there. And according to some of the news I got just before we came on, the United States and Israel hit a petrochemical and an aluminum plant in Iran literally right before this was announced. So one wonders, if there's going to be any retaliation from that, if the Iranian side is going to say, that is a huge blow to our economy and we're going to retaliate in kind, because that's what they have said, that they would retaliate in kind if those kinds of things happen. That's one of the things we'll watch about to see what kind of reaction they get from that. But there's no question that Iran has been hit very hard, and the threat of a big strike coming tonight had certainly to play a role in that, because Iran definitely wants this war to be over. The thing that we need to understand, though, is that Iran, they're willing to suffer a long time to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And they have been adamant that nothing will be solved here unless they have some kind of, it won't be ended unless they have some kind of guarantees that it won't happen again. And so that's one of the first things we'll be looking to see as well is what demands will they ask for? A ceasefire right now just says we're going to stop, but for it to permeate and to go beyond that means that both sides are going to be asking for things that the other side's probably not going to want to give. So therein is going to be the real sticky points. Are we willing to give something that Iran can live with? And will they agree to something unless they get some kind of real guarantees that this doesn't happen again 6 months from now, which has been their biggest concern all along?
Yeah, that is such a very good point. I do want to put up another post here because we are getting them in as they come into our newsroom. Some of these breaking news. Again, Meg Kennard with the AP saying the Iran foreign minister says the passage through the Strait of Hormuz allowed next 2 weeks under Iranian military management. We'll see how that is because so much pressure in terms of insurance for this. We're also talking about this because this post from President Trump earlier talking about this ceasefire, saying it's a double-sided ceasefire. And I want to ask you about another component of this because Israel also involved in this. It was Operation Epic Fury, also Operation Roaring Lion. And just recently in Tel Aviv in Israel, they're continuing to hear some of those developments. I want to put up a post from Trey Yinks talking about some of these sirens that continue to go off in that region, saying moments after President Trump announced agreement of the 2-week ceasefire, early alerts were sent out for the incoming missile fire toward Tel Aviv. And Daniel, that's an interesting component, how Israel is involved. They say it's a two-sided ceasefire. Does that mean Israel isn't involved?
Well, there are 3 sides here, so that is a question. But I think I saw elsewhere that Israel was involved, that the United States and Israel agreed to that. But one wonders if that, what Trey Yinks was talking about there, is the response from Iran saying, hey, you just hit our petrochemical sites and then said you wanted a ceasefire. Well, we're going to get a tit-for-tat situation. We'll see what that ends up being. But the fact that there was some kind of alert inside Tel Aviv, right after this was announced, shows that it's very tenuous and anything can turn this thing off. So again, I'm really optimistic and hopeful that this does lead to someplace, but we got to be sober minded to see that there are a lot of issues. And that last statement you put up there from the Iranian side say, yeah, we'll have a ceasefire and we'll open it up under our military control. So they're not giving up control of anything. They're just saying for now, we'll let traffic go through. So we'll see how that goes as well.
Yeah, how much might this be a test for the United States and Israel? If it's obviously they're involved, Israel has to play the game as well as the United States. They have to be uniformly on the exact same page with the ceasefire, that they have no errant thoughts or kind of objectives in all of this. How much of a test is it between those two allies?
Yeah, it's a real question, and we've had some issues with this in the past. I mean, you mentioned the issue about the Hamas. There's also issues with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. There's been some conflict and differences between us, and definitely a lot here in the Iranian situation, where Israel has been wanting to go, a lot harder. And they said they didn't want a ceasefire, and they were, doing things earlier on to that kind of, and if we're just being honest, kind of undermined President Trump's position a few times when he did things that looked like he was making an agreement. For example, the Israeli side assassinated one of the negotiators that we were dealing with just a number of days ago, would seem to undercut that. So that's something that's going to have to be navigated pretty carefully, because if Netanyahu doesn't want the ceasefire as much as President Trump does, then that could be a problem.
Yeah, and I want to take us back, obviously, just based on your perspective as you served there overseas in this region, in the Middle East as a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I want to ask you, because we were set for this 8 p.m. deadline, and they said a whole civilization will die tonight. And obviously, that is a very stark, a very dire threat from the president. What potentially was on his mind? What objectives, what strategy was out there for President Trump to look at tonight? And will we be in the same scenario 2 weeks from now saying similar rhetoric?
Yeah, I mean, man, you look at the landscape of negotiated settlements and how wars come to an end just, over the centuries, really. And even in the modern history, they're oftentimes, fits and starts, and you got a ceasefire one time and all of a sudden it falls apart 5 minutes later, or goes on for a number of days, and then it falls apart, and then they try to get it back together again. So I doubt that this is going to be a nice, easy situation here. And that's one of the things that we have to be careful about is, how tender is it? How easy is it to violate? Because now then you've got at least 3 parties, any one of which could upset it. And then somebody says, oh, well, you broke the terms of it, and now we're going to go back in and hit it again. And then the whole thing gets started. So it's really difficult. But the thing is, and I think one of the things that gives some hope is that all 3 parties have need for this thing to be over with. Israel has taken tremendous hits, and they are, according to the Washington Post last week, sometimes up to 80% of the Iranian missiles get through. Well, they can't absorb that kind of hit much longer. Obviously, Iran is getting hit really hard by both Israel and the United States, and lots of things are getting destroyed there. They have obviously some success in the air as they just took down a number of our aircraft, but it's limited. And so most of our sorties get through. Us, on the other hand, our inventories of JASSM long-range missiles, the Tomahawks, the interceptor missiles are running dangerously low. We can't just keep going on with this to go on without any stop, because our inventories are going to be a problem. So everybody has a reason for this to be over. So let's hope that can rule the day. But again, ceasefire is one thing. That was hard. But getting to terms that everybody can agree to, that's going to be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and an entanglement is very troubling. A long entanglement, very different ramifications in all of this. President Trump also said that they would potentially strike power plants in the region. They'd strike potentially oil facilities, energy sites, talking about bridges as well. If that is on the table again in 2 weeks' time, if still negotiations rage on, would that signal a escalation for you? How would that change the complexion if the United States does go through with striking some of this infrastructure?
Yeah, that was my biggest concern, my biggest worry when President Trump made that Truth Social about, destroying the civilization, and, they wouldn't even be able to rise up again because, number one, our conventional capability can't wreak that kind of damage. I mean, you'd have to go months and months of bombing in a country that big that has that many underground facilities and, mountainous terrain, whatever. You just couldn't do that in 4 hours, like you said. So I assume that was just kind of hyperbole. But if you started going down that path and said, all right, we're going to hit your energy infrastructure, we're going to hit your oil facilities, we're going to hit your bridges, that kind of thing, then the Iranian side said unequivocally they will retaliate in kind. And of course, you're talking UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. they could hit all those things. And just like they got through the Iron Dome system in Iran, they definitely could get through the systems and air defense in those other countries. And they've already suffered a lot of harm themselves. And if they specifically went after oil refinement capabilities and oil pumping and oil storage, et cetera, things that they actually have to have for their lifeblood, or God help us, if the Iranian side chose to go after desalination plants, which could be an existential risk for the populations of these countries, things could get ugly real fast. So the threat of the U.S. bombing all these things, at Trump's deadline that was set for 8 p.m. tonight would have been really bad for Iran. But we have to understand there would have been some kind of retaliation, which would have been bad for our side. So for everybody's sake, I'm glad that we have this ceasefire tonight.
Yeah, and obviously everyone grateful. Now we're in the 6th week, but we're still in that window that President Trump really laid out at the outset, the 4 to 6 weeks, and obviously 2 more weeks would be on that timeline. Is that still something that President Trump and the White House hope for? Is that something to make this happen, make this come to an end quickly?
You know what? Militarily, I think in that statement, he said that we have met or exceeded all of our military objectives, but I mean, you haven't. Because the regime is still fully in control. The missile system is still fully capable. They're continuing to manufacture and fly drones. We haven't stopped any of that. And of course, they have military control over that strait. So I don't think you could really say we've met all of our military objectives, and we don't have the reprocessed material either. So even that hasn't changed from what was just ostensibly the driving factor that started all this. So that is going to be a problem. This idea that we were going to have this done in 4 to 6 weeks was never realistic, if I'm just being honest, because the problem set in a country that's as big as 2/3 of Eastern Europe in that kind of terrain, 4 times bigger than Iraq, and we have no ground force. That was always going to be a bridge too far. So we're definitely not a couple of weeks from winning militarily, or we wouldn't have had a ceasefire. Just be honest. If we could have won this in 2 weeks militarily, we would have pressed ahead. The fact that we've done a ceasefire shows that we need the time.
All right, we'll see what happens in 2 weeks' time. Obviously, everyone can exhale right now.
As Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the entire Trump regime are claiming they are free to destroy any of their documents and emails and internal memos and their presidential records, as many people, I think, are rightfully saying that this Trump regime has been engaged in heinous war crimes and other horrific and unlawful conduct. Groups are now pushing back to say, we need to stop you immediately from spoliating or destroying your records, which could be evidence in future cases, whether those cases involve future war crime tribunals, whether they involve future criminal cases, whether they involve future congressional hearings. You can't destroy your documents. So in the midst of everything going on with the chaos taking place throughout the world, this didn't really get reported enough, but we've been drilling down on it on the Midas Touch Network. The Department of Justice, through its Office of Legal Counsel, issued a memo saying that the Presidential Records Act is unconstitutional. The Presidential Records Act requires that the president, the executive branch, preserve their records that are presidential in nature, that you can't delete or shred it because it belongs to the people. It belongs to taxpayers. It belongs to the people who deserve to have the ability to hold the president accountable. And you can't just start shredding all of your records. Since this Presidential Records Act law was passed in the late 70s, kind of post-Nixon shredding documents, no one challenged this. No one said it was unconstitutional. It's kind of a foregone conclusion that it was constitutional and lawful. And right now, with everything going on, April 2026, the Trump regime swoops in and says, we're not following it. In essence, we'll be able to destroy our records. So you may have been watching the Midas Touch coverage, and one of the things that I and Harry Littman had been talking about is, so which group can step up and have standing? Because for you to sue, you have to have standing. The case has to be ripe. There are certain prerequisites for a case to be filed in federal court to ask a judge to take certain steps, or eventually perhaps a jury. So which group stepped up? Two groups joined forces, the American Historical Association and American Oversight, and they sued Trump, they sued J.D. Vance, they sued the White House, they sued Susan Wiles, frankly, all of Trump's cabinet, all of the executive branch administrations, to block them from shredding and destroying their records. I like that they filed this with a sense of urgency. And just to give you a sense of the group that filed it, American Historical Association, and why they say they have standing, they're a nonprofit organization founded in 1884 and incorporated by Congress in 1889 for the promotion of historical studies, for the collection and preservation of historical manuscripts, and for the kindred purpose in the interest of American history and of the history in America. This group's mission is to enhance the work of historians, including by promoting professional standards and ethics, innovative scholarship, teaching, academic freedom, and international collaboration. And it talks about how this group and many of its members have a unique interest in presidential records and have previously pursued legal action to enforce the Presidential Records Act, that this group and its members regularly request and make use of presidential and vice presidential records. They're headquartered in Washington, D.C. In other words, they're saying, we have standing, Judge. And here's what they're basically alleging. This case is about the preservation of records that document our nation's history and whether the American people are able to access and learn from history. Yet the stakes of this case are even greater. The executive branch has declared the power to override the legal determinations of the U.S. Supreme Court in order to override the laws passed by Congress to preserve and provide public access to official records of the president's activities. The executive branch has nullified the determinations of the other two branches of the government so that the president may claim these official government records to be his own. Days ago, the Office of Legal Counsel put forward this memo, and they're saying that they have the ability to destroy all of their records. They've declared the Presidential Records Act unconstitutional by fiat, even though the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of a materially identical law 50 years ago in Nixon v. Administrator of General Services, a 1977 case. The OLC legal opinion declaring the Presidential Records Act unconstitutional makes no serious effort to distinguish the Presidential Records Act from the prior law that the Supreme Court upheld, the Presidential Recordings and Materials Preservation Act, nor could it. Instead, OLC, that's the Office of Legal Counsel, simply decided that the Supreme Court got it wrong. The administration's actions nullifying a law duly enacted by Congress based on legal determinations that contravene a decision by the Supreme Court violate the separation of powers twice over. I want to bring in Harry Littman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. And Harry, as you and I were covering the ballroom case, where a group successfully blocked the construction of Donald Trump's Golden Ballroom, it was the National Trust for the Preservation of DC in the United States. They had standing because their unique area was preservation of architectural buildings in DC. This group, American Historical Society, seems to be a variation of that for the records, and they've sued before in this area. So, Harry, first off, it's important that one way or another, I think this behavior by the Trump regime gets blocked because these records do belong to us, and we shouldn't be deleting evidence, especially during these very, very concerning times would be an understatement. But then there was the second issue of, well, who can do it? Because we're in such unprecedented times where, as the group said, by fiat, Trump's DOJ just like, yeah, the Supreme Court ruled that an identical law was valid, but we're not going to follow it. We just say, whatever, it's unlawful. So what do you make of it all, Harry?
No.
Wow. So, Ben, it's been 14 months of just a flood of outrages and power grabs, and you kind of can miss what's really big and out there. This sounds a little bit dry, presidential records. This is a very, very big deal. Let's just start, as you said, this is in the wake of Nixon. Remember, the first count of impeachment against him had to do with destruction of records. And since this act was passed in 1978, not only has no one in the executive branch questioned its constitutionality, it's been punctiliously adhered to. All the processes, you get very careful training to make sure you preserve everything and you do it by the book. And the whole premise, of course, is, as you say, and this is the overriding issue, these records belong to the people, even if there's a short-term reason to keep them under wraps, national security or whatever. At the end of the day, we have to be able, as a democracy, to know what happened and understand what happened. So this is a direct assault on that principle. That's point one. Point two, the Office of Legal Counsel that wrote this memo is considered to be authoritative within the executive branch. A good example, the Mueller report. The OLC had said that you can't indict a sitting president. The Supreme Court hadn't, but remember, Bob Mueller said, I'm not going to even detail all this stuff about Trump because it would be unfair because I can't indict him, so he can't clear his name. What that means is OLC opines and the rest of the branch is supposed to fall in. And that means right now, the law as it's understood in the executive branch is there is no Presidential Record Act. It's the theory of the OLC memo is that somehow Congress has usurped the power of the executive by telling it what it can and can't do with public records. And that leads to your third big point. Who is able to challenge this? Because under this interpretation, it's really the case that right now they could be shredding like maniacs saying, well, this is what the law now is in the executive branch. You are right that there's a similarity to what happened in the East Wing, but that very opinion is on a so-called emergency appeal where the first argument is Judge Leon got it wrong on standing, and you can bet we're going to see an aggressive pushback in these two lawsuits, and the administration basically saying, we've changed our mind. We can do whatever the heck we want, and there's no one withstanding to challenge it. That is really what you're going to see. And like so many other cases that we've seen over the last 14 months, a really, really important point is going to be whether a district court enters an injunction to say, hold your horses, administration. Let's figure this out and get all the arguments in, and then we'll decide. In the meantime, let's not get the shredding machine fired up yet, because if they don't, if higher courts like the DC Circuit, like the Supreme Court, do what they've done so often in the so-called shadow docket, which is to say, while we figure this out, you go ahead and do as you like, executive branch. They could get rid of crown jewels of history in a day, in a week. And if they've got the green light to do it, the harm is irreparable. So this is a big deal. The day's going to come, knock on wood, when there's going to be a cavalry come in to assess the damage and try to make things better. And if, in the manner of fleeing dictators, everything's been destroyed, it is a total insult to and real kind of disabling of the public interest.
Harry Littman, the fact that we're even talking about
Yeah.
this. I mean, it would be like the mafia passing a law that basically says RICO is an unlawful statute, and we hereby declare you can't do RICO to investigate us. And it's like, what are you talking about? RICO's always been used to break up the mob. It's literally a version of that, saying, you know what? There's no such thing as the Presidential Records Act. Yeah, but the Supreme Court basically held there was, and this has been a law that was passed by Congress. Yeah, but we're not following that. Yeah. So just challenge us.
So sue us. Oh, you can't sue us. Nobody is standing.
And by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, we'll have already deleted the documents and we'll say, oopsie, so who's going to prosecute us? That's what happens. Our system, for what a lot of people said was a brilliance to the structure of checks and balances. I mean, there needs to be, in the 2026 world, honestly, a revisiting of the Constitution holistically, because there are so many loopholes that it swallows the Constitution if you have someone who doesn't view the terms as an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing within it. The Constitution doesn't say a lot. It really doesn't. It's always fascinating when I teach constitutional law at law school, and I go, here's the Second Amendment. It's like, 25 words or something, that's it. That's everything. So it's like, how do people get all of this jurisprudence from those words? And I'm like, it just gets interpreted, and then those cases get interpreted and things or whatever. And so if you don't use an implied covenant of good faith to review the Constitution, then it's so easy to break apart because the whole thing's based on good faith. Anyway, I'll let you get the final word.
Yeah, just a couple points. No, you put it really well. And there is such a covenant. It's called the Take Care Clause, that the laws be faithfully executed, but that hasn't bound them at all. We've seen them again and again, Ben, do things like claiming emergency powers to try to cover things up, not produce things. This is a broadside in support of that principle like nothing we've seen. Forget about temporarily keeping from the view of Congress or the people. We'll just rev up the shredding machine. That's what the OLC opinion says we can do, try to stop us. This is coming at the sort of, heart of democracy like a freight train.
Everybody, make sure you subscribe to Harry Littman's YouTube channel.
Go for it. Follow me.